I can swim. Just can't walk or dress myself. He's...
will ever kill me. Salute, and welcome back to the Black Ocean. And now, so I'm getting deep in with your host, the one and only Great Black Shark. Give me a black fist and a thumbs up if you can hear me loud and clear, family. Black fist and a thumbs up if you can hear me loud and clear. Let me check on my end.
Welcome.
All right, I can hear myself just fine. What about you in the chat room? Give me a black fist and thumbs up if you can hear me loud and clear, because tonight we're going to have to break down and go back old school with the content on this channel. If you have been a long-time subscriber, then you know that primary content that I did in the early beginnings of this channel was history-based on a number of different things. We're going to have to go back there tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, yes, we are. Because, see, first, let me go ahead and clarify the purpose of the broadcast here tonight, because we got a lot to get through. The young man in the thumbnail, Mr. Austin Holloman, okay? Now, let's be clear on a couple of things. Yes, the young brother is foundational Black American freedman, okay, or Black American, however he wants to refer to himself. So he's not a tether. He's in Kenya right now, okay? You may know him from Passport Bros fame, etc. A lot of the things the young man has, controversies surrounding him. I'm not going to be dealing with that tonight. I'm going to be dealing with some recent statements he made, and we're going to make sure we play his words. And my point of contention, as you see in the thumbnail, is we're going to correct this Irish slaves misnomer, okay? We've broken down from the A road to the zero and a great many other things tonight. Oh, yes, we are. Because, see, let me tell y'all something, man. The American school system, or as I call it, the public food system, it's terrible, okay? It is horrible, and it gives half-truths and outright lies about many things, especially regarding the history of Black Americans. But here's the thing. Some of us were fortunate enough to have parents that made sure that the education started in the home, and that's what my parents did. I had the privilege to study under many scholars, okay, when I was a young man. As you all know, I've met some of our grandmaster teachers that have transitioned on, okay? I've spoken about that in the past. So for me, history is one of the things that has been my wheelhouse, okay? And again, I want to say at the onset, the purpose of this broadcast is not to go back and forth with the young man, Austin Holloman. It is not even to teach him. It is to correct the misnomers in history he has spewed out there. He has a misconception from a great many things that you will all see here tonight. And that's what we're going to be dealing with. So if the young man comes across this, it's up to him to learn from it. If he does not, that is not the purpose, because I'm going to tell you something. One of the things that I've learned early on is I know which people that if you present them with wisdom, it's like burning the ears of a fool, okay? Wisdom burns the ears of a fool, all right? So I'm not, going to try to force, what I'm saying, somebody to drink water, okay? We're not doing that here tonight. My thing is, I don't care what size channel you have, when you start making errors about our history, oh, that's going to have to be corrected, okay? Especially pertaining to our lineage. So that's the purpose of the broadcast here tonight. I don't do beefing. I'm not going back and forth. You know me, we're going to get it straight one time and one time only, all right? Not everybody has the gist of the broadcast tonight. Let me scroll up and greet those of you that I see. Let me make sure I have the chat room pulled up properly here. Loud and clear. If there's any audio issues, we want to get this straight, especially tonight. Very important broadcast, okay? And I will be addressing the Mr. Hinton situation. There's a lot to speak on about that. All right, there's some other stories that have hit my desk also, but just know that's going to be coming up. I know everybody's speaking on it, but what I have to say on that, yeah, I'm going to have to take my time and really put all of that together, okay? And by the way, while we're talking about our good brother, Mr. Hinton, Mr. Rodney Hinton, salute to that Black father, all right? That brother is having good problems, believe it or not, even with what he's dealing with. People found out what that brother's books were, and his books are staying full. So I'm proud of us for that. I've heard there's a GoFundMe out or what have you. Now, I don't know which one is official. I'm still working to find out what that actually is. I want to make sure that, we have the legitimate one to fund, because, the white supremacists, they think they're smart and they go setting up fake GoFundMes and stuff. Yeah, you know those knuckleheads. But anyway, our brother, we going to support him just as much as we're supporting our young brother, Carmelo Anthony. We haven't forgot about him. I'm proud of this point of our history for our people, okay? But anyway, let me go ahead and read those of you that I see and put this chat room up correctly here. All right, I got it. Salute to the good sister Sakina Collins for the cash out. People showing love already. I appreciate that. I see my brother Domsky Arcade in the building. Priscilla Taylor's in here. Charles Gibson, Only Pamela's Way. My good brother Rob, an educator from the Chi-Town. What's going on, my brother? Long time no see. Tanisha Murdoch is in here. Sakina Collins. Charles Gibson, Mr. Sam. What's going on, my good brother? Salute to you and your wife as well, Mrs. L. Let's see. I see Mrs. L in here also. Melvin Harrison Jr. What's going on? Diesel Mike in the building. What's going on? Hey, my brother Diesel Mike. Hey, yeah, that's right. We blacks. Hey, of course, we got to stop and talk about that. My brother Diesel Mike is talking about an inside joke from my brother Tariq Nasheed's chat. The white supremacists, they think we can't tell them online, just like the tethers. And the irony, they have very similar behavior patterns. They come in there, we don't call ourselves the blacks or we blacks, okay? Usually the only black people from our lineage that do that are a bunch of Sambos. But for the most part, I don't ever greet y'all with, hey, how my blacks doing today? Well, what Donald Trump said, I love my African Americans. Oh, boy, that was hilarious, man. I see my Lieutenant Tab Chan in the building. What's going on? Let's see. Alfonso Sullivan in here. Seven Skills is in the building. Let's see. Dad Miller TV is in here. Derek Parker's in here. Diesel James, I see you. Let's see. Anybody else? I think that's everybody that I see. So salute and welcome to everybody that's in attendance and anybody that be joining us later on. Now, I know some of y'all probably familiar with the young man in the thumbnail. All right. We're not going to be petty. It's a lot you can say about the young man. Everybody was young at one point. He got a lot of learning to do about a lot of things, but we're going to teach him something on his history tonight, should he choose to come across his broadcast. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started with exactly how this came about. All right. But before we do that, first, let me go ahead and get into teaching mode here. All right. Now, if you are on my Patreon, most of you have had access to this for a while. The first book by Alexander von Wuthenau, okay, Unexpected Faces in Ancient America. All right. This is a white man, a scholar detailing that most of our people, okay, were already here, and some, because we are not people over here in these media spaces that deny the transatlantic slave trade. Anybody that's going with that, you've been given bad information and you are incorrect. I don't care who it is, Austin Holloman or anybody else. Okay. So now we all know that we have African descent, like most people on the planet, but we have more so than others because some people came and were brought from the continent of Africa as enslaved people over here that mixed in with those of us that were already here. Furthermore, if you know anything about the white supremacist Walter Plecker, that reclassified a lot of Native Americans that were dark-skinned Negro people, you know what I'm saying, to the term Negro. I mean, there's a lot of history that if you're not taught, you don't know. And let me tell you something. Everybody was ignorant of something at one point. If you don't know something, you have to be taught. So you will be in ignorance until you've been taught. Now, where you transcend ignorance and graduate to full-blown stupidity is when people hand you knowledge and you start saying, well, anything that was written in a book, it's going to be true, huh? Okay. All right. When people are trying to give you peer-reviewed sources to give you information that you can look up and you still reject it, remember what I said. Wisdom burns the ears of a fool. So those of you that have been on my Patreon, you had access to the first book here for quite some time. We have a shop now on Patreon, and due to a lot of the white supremacist shenanigans, I have placed that book and many other rare books and documents that you can't get here for cheap over in the shop for an affordable price. That's where all the rare documents and books will be from now on. Okay. Now, the second book, They Came Before Columbus by Ivan Van Sertima, all right? This is for the people, not just Austin, anybody that were like, well, y'all, all that we was already here bullshit. No, we're going to get into some scholarship here tonight. These are 2 books, one by a white man, one by a black man, that will break that down for you and teach you about those of our ancestors that were already here. See, when you have a strong command of history, not just with books, Austin, and anybody else, because y'all gonna get into why I'm saying it here, boy. Let me stick to what we're saying. When people are very well read and thorough scholars and have actually traveled to many of these places and done the groundwork, like our grandmaster teachers like Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Francis Chris Welsing, Dr. Ben Yakinen. Okay, I mean, I'll be here naming scholars all night, all right? We know what we're talking about, all right? And I'm not placing myself in their category, but I am a student of their work, all right? As many of you in here in this chat room, if you've been subscribed to this platform a long period of time, you've heard me mention any and all of them and refer back to their works, okay? So now, when you start talking about nobody knows what happened back then and nobody was a slave, how would you know? Well, the answer to that question is when you have actual documentation, like the 1870 census and forward, you can prove certain things as far as going back to your lineage here on this land. That doesn't mean that you deny that we are of African descent, not those of us that are intelligent. We are a mixture of people, but the term ethnogenesis, that's what we've had. When you've been somewhere removed from an original homeland origin for over 500 years, 500 generations, what have you, become a new ethnic group. We have been detached from the original languages, cultural norms, or what have you of any place over on the continent. Hence why we say, pay attention for the slow people that might be listening, not the people in my chat, the slow folks, okay? And Austin, we don't know if you're one of them or not, but everybody that finds this should listen. We are not saying that we are not of African descent genetically. We're saying we're not culturally African, okay? So that's for Austin and anybody else that has gotten bad information about what foundational Black American freedmen stand for, okay? So I just want to go ahead and correct that. And salute to the good brother Aretta Sussay King, Mr. Dad Miller TV for the cash out. Thank you. But that's what I wanted to go ahead and clear up in the onset of the broadcast tonight, okay? So if you're going to be the type of person that when people try to present you with peer review, actual scholarship, tell you which books to read, and you just deny all of that, talking about whatever's in the book, it must be true, you're unteachable at that point, okay? You're most unteachable because, see, I tell everybody over here on this platform, just because I present it to you, I don't expect you to believe it. I expect you to do your own research and see if what I said to you was accurate or not. Everybody that's been familiar with my work over here over the years, you know that, okay? If I'm going to present you something, I'm going to present you something that's accurate, okay? Not going to just tell you something and be like, oh, believe it because I said so, okay? I don't play that game over here. Now, the next things we're going to have to review We're going to get into something that, made me do this broadcast because I'm like, when it comes to anybody with any incorrect information on history, I'm like, nah, we're going to have to get this straight. So we're going to go ahead and start reviewing what got us here, okay? So now I'm going to show you some screenshots from the young man Austin Holloman's chat on a recent video he did talking about the subject we're going to be getting corrected over here tonight. Pay attention to the screen here. You see me. This is my comment here, and I'm going to read it. I said, Austin, I recommend you get the book, The Delectable Negro by Vincent Woodard. It will open your eyes to a great deal about American chattel slavery. Moreover, the Irish were paid indentured servants. Now, you see what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to educate the young man, all right? One of the things that I teach people over the years, especially those of us who are older, our job is not to mock young people. Our job is to attempt to teach, okay? Our job is to attempt to teach, okay? So when we try to attempt to teach people, it's up to them to receive it. Now, again, if you're going to teach anybody anything, you need to make sure you know what you're talking about. You need to make sure that you have accurate information. If they ask questions, you need to be able to answer those questions and provide them with materials and research that they can go and verify these things for yourself. And you're going to see I tried to do this here in this conversation. Okay. So now I said the Irish were released after 7 years with wages. Freedom dues. Those of us that know that, we know they were freedom dues. We're going to prove that here tonight. That's not slavery. Trying to correct the young man. Now you're going to see his tone here in the chat, because this was his chat room. This man could talk any way he wants in his chat room. But I find it very sad. One, the American public food system, it does not teach, educate, you know what I'm saying, especially our children. It more so indoctrinates. And then this is where it falls upon the parents to make sure that your children are educated on what the school system does not teach. And I thank God that both of mine and my uncles and grandparents on both sides took that very seriously, okay? So his response to me was bullshit. Oh, we gonna get to proving that it wasn't, but that's what he says. Nobody even taught us being brought. Oh, y'all know this go. Oh boy, I'm gonna have a field day with this. So I tried to tell him, I said, nah, it's documented history, not bullshit. You can verify this. And if you see down here, it's kind of covered up from some of the things on the screen, but I said nobody taught you in capital letters how they were indentured service for 7 years, okay? And were let go in America, okay? So now you see what the tone of this conversation is going on. I'm trying to help this young brother, because one of the things that, you know, that made me start this channel, let me tell y'all something in case you don't know, or in case you're new here. I hate to see my people running around in ignorance and you understand? I don't like that. I like for my people to be in the know on things. I don't like seeing our people, you know what I'm saying, running around with bad information. I don't like seeing our people, you know, just being left out of sorts on things because they don't have proper information. I hate to see that. So, you know, that's what I try to do. I try to present accurate information on anything. You know, I'm very patient with young people in particular. Over the years, I've had that reputation on and offline in my community. You know, I try to give the game as it was given to me, okay? Because in this world, one of the key things that how far you go in life, you can have boatloads of money. You can even have certain measures of respect, but I'm going to tell you what transcends all of that. Y'all know I preached this for years. Information, your knowledge, okay? Your knowledge will open doors that will remain shut to money. And in some cases, even no matter how much respect you have, if you don't have certain those doors either, okay? So that's what I try to do. But furthermore, let's continue reading, all right? As you see, I told him nobody taught him about it, but they were indentured service for 7 years with pay and let go in America. Now, watch where he starts to go. He says the Irish were slaves to the English. That's why they were part of the UK. Now, I'm talking about here in America, okay? I was talking about in America. That's what we was addressing, all right? Now, there's no dispute about that. That's actual documented history. We know why the Irish and the British didn't get along for years. The IRA, okay, they designated them a terrorist group, but from the Irish point of view, they were freedom fighters, okay? So, I mean, it just depends on, you know, what heritage you are and how you look at that. So nobody's arguing with him about that, but I want you to see where he's about to go with this, right? Because I have to show y'all this before we get down to breaking everything down here. So I tried to furthermore explain to him, because like the video he made, he had some facts correct, but he had others that I could tell. I was like, oh, you didn't really get taught about the rest of this. And that's not his fault, okay? The young man is 24, I want to believe. I think he said he's 24. Very young dude, okay? And, you know, if you didn't have people to teach you certain things, that's just not your fault. So I'm not picking on him on that. I know my chat room. I know how y'all could be. Cut the young man some slack. We're going to seek to educate over here more so than mock anyone, okay? So now I tried to explain to him the actual chronology of the transatlantic slave trade, the origins of it, so to speak. And for those that don't know, in case you're a young person listening over here, the Arabs, they started first. I'm talking about dealing with Africans and black folks, okay? Whichever term you want to use. The Portuguese picked it up from the Arabs, and then the British, they picked it up and perfected it with the brutality that we know as American chattel slavery, okay? All right. The Arabs were pretty brutal, but the British, hey, they added a lot more to that. And we're going to get into that history here tonight. So I was trying to tell him the chronology of that. And I said, that's the origin of the transatlantic slave trade in chronological order. All right. So now, he's talking to other people in his chat here, as you see in the second one. That's him in yellow. He said, or is that wrong too? He's talking to me, asking if I'm disputing that. I'm like, okay, y'all know me. I'm a very direct person. And if I didn't say I disputed something, then that means I didn't. Okay. Y'all know me. I am very vocal if I have a point of contention anywhere, on or offline. So he picks it up. He says, is what I ask you right or wrong? And I'm like, at this point, you argue with yourself. I never said that you were wrong about the Irish being slaves to the British. Never said that once. That is not my point of contention. And, sometimes in these chat rooms, if you're communicating in short sentences like that, I get it. A lot of communication is lost in translation is lost. And then depending on how many people you have in your chat, you may or may not see what a person you're responding to has told you. So I get that. Maybe that's what was going on here. I don't know. But again, that was not my point of contention. We're going to get my point of contention straightened out here tonight. Oh, yes, we are. Okay. So, further, we got to continue. Make sure that everybody's up to speed on how this conversation here got started, or this broadcast got started here. So he says, here's the part right here that I find somewhat sad. And look, y'all know me, I could crack jokes, but this is not funny. I'm going to be honest with you. This is not funny. This is something that, I blame the public school system here in America, because that's where the young man grew up before he started traveling. And I'm glad he's traveling. I just wish he would have conducted himself better in certain instances, but that's not to be discussed here tonight. Travel is the best education you can get. So kudos to any young black person, man or woman, that travels. Okay, it will expand your horizons on a great many things. But this is what I find sad, family. Let's read it. As you see, the young man Austin says, just because it's from a source doesn't mean it's right. I could write a book saying my shit is chalk white and you believe it, huh? Because it's in a book. Woo! Let me take this time to speak beyond Mr. Austin Holloman and to Gen Z in particular, because y'all know me. I care more so about the younger generations, all right, because that's the future of our people. So I'm speaking beyond Austin Holloman at this point. Let me talk to those of you in Gen Z and Gen Alpha. When an elder is trying to tell you something, okay, when your elders are trying to tell you something, and they're trying to give you information that you might didn't receive or you didn't hear about or that's new to you, it would behoove you to listen. It doesn't cost you anything to listen. So now let's deal with a statement. He says, just because it's from a source doesn't mean it's right. That is correct. That is correct. However, those like myself, I don't give out incorrect sources to anything. My track record is solid on that. So if I'm telling you something, you might disagree with it. You might say you don't like it, but I guarantee you one damn thing. If you go look up what I'm telling you, you're going to say, yep, that brother was spot on with what he was saying. And you just may do your own research and find out something that I didn't tell you. Okay. So the whole trying to be a smart ass talking about if you wrote a book saying your shit is chalk white. Let me tell you something, young man, and anybody with your attitude. One of the most embarrassing things in the world is to move through the world in a state of perpetual ignorance. Okay. That handicaps you as a man. That handicaps you. When you move through the world in a state of perpetual ignorance, not only does it handicap you, it puts you at a distinct disadvantage with anything in life, okay? See, my elders got that through to me early on. I was a young child that came to value knowledge, all right, and learning and scholarship. I can't speak for Mr. Holloman's education. I don't know what it is. I'm not sure, what he did in high school or college, if he has any. But again, I'm more so faulting the education system and whoever in his family did not teach him about what we're going to go over here tonight. Okay. I told him, I said, correct. However, those professors I mentioned, and I mentioned Dr. John Henry Clark, several others. I tried to give him people that if he would have tried to check what I was saying, he would have been able to learn something. So anyway, I told him, I said, correct. Those professors I mentioned did get it right. It's up to you to learn if you wish. Or if not, you will continue to present inaccuracies on this subject, which he will. Okay, because I'm going to tell you something. If you know anything about that young man, young people, period, that are like him, I'm not going to say all of Gen Z or Gen Alpha, his kind can be very hard-headed, and you cannot teach them, okay? So that's a bit of context for where we're going here tonight, all right? So when we get started on the main meat of the subject matter, I'm going to try to go as fast as I can, but there's a lot to present because I want to do this for the young people that may not have access to quality education, or maybe there's no one in their family that cares to teach them like my parents did, okay? I don't assume everybody had my upbringing. That's one of the reasons I started my platform, okay? So now we're going to leave Mr. Austin alone for a second here, and I'm going to present you another reason why this is an important broadcast here tonight, okay? So I'm going to play this without interruption. All right, family, I'm going to play it without interruption, and y'all going to see why I made the comments that I made about the American public school system.
So this is how you know slavery ain't really happened. Tell me why modern day 2025, we don't have any boats coming directly from Africa to America. There's no way to get to Africa on a boat. There's no way. I've been to Africa. I know. There's no way to get to Africa on the boat today. And we supposedly have better technology today, right? But yet in 20, and I asked myself this as a kid. I'm like, so we got here, because everything we got, I know it's hard for y'all to believe that everything you learned in school was a lie. Everything they taught you in school was a lie. So if they taught you got over here on boats, baby, you been here. If they taught you that it's red, baby, it's blue. Y'all get what I'm saying? But y'all know these are programming centers, right? They're not schools to teach us and help us evolve and become our best versions, right? No. They're programming centers, right? So if anybody came over here on boats, we know it was the West Indians, the Caribbeans, the South Americans, somebody close. Nobody came from Africa on no boats. And we know that Caribbeans is us. They're the chosen ones as well. We know that. So let's stop with the lies. Let's stop miseducating our people. Let's quit telling our kids lies that we learned in school when we all know the school system is here to fail us. Y'all know in America we have like the worst school system. Like we're rated like last. Like, can we please quit teaching our kids what we learned in school? Like, self-love is the best love. When you start to love yourself, go within, focus on evolving, focus on becoming your best version, to become your highest self. Because as you raise your frequency, the planet of the earth rises, right? So that means you're doing your part. Just focus on self-love and evolution. And the truth will come to you. The truth is all from within. It's a collective consciousness. We all one, baby. It's all love.
All right, so I let that play in its entirety to present to you the seriousness of this broadcast here tonight. Now, I'm not going to make fun of that young sister, and I'm assuming she's Caribbean because I paid attention to what she was saying. She said, she mentioned Caribbean people being chosen, but let me deal with something because I often hear this misnomer. And look, again, I agree with her. The American public school system is trash. It is garbage. It is designed to indoctrinate and create worker bees in a system. It is not designed to educate you to be a problem solver, an entrepreneur, a business owner, and nothing like that, okay? It's a drone creation system, all right? For Black parents, you must take this into consideration and not leave it up to these public schools to educate your children. As, many others have said, Malcolm most famously, you only a fool leaves it up to their adversaries to educate their children. But let's deal with a couple of things here, right? I often hear some individuals, and maybe Austin thought that we were along the train of thought to, deny the transatlantic slave trade. You'll see why I said that in a moment. I'm not going to speak for the young man. I'll let him speak a little bit shortly here. But when you start talking about the transatlantic slave trade and you get to talking about the slave ships, first and foremost, the numbers that, that African slaves were brought over here on those boats are exaggerated. Between 3 and 5% of us came to North America. The greater majority went to the Caribbean, okay? I've heard people also say, well, the transatlantic slave trade deniers. Now, I'm not one of them because I know better and I've read the documentation and I don't play that game. That's about with the flat earthers, okay? Listen, a lot of people have said, well, if we had came over here on boats, why ain't nobody found the slave ship today? Now, for the people that talk like that, you do know at this time, this was before the Industrial Revolution, all the ships were made of wood at that time. Now, just like wood today, wood, ladies and gentlemen, is biodegradable. And I'm not talking to my audience. I know you all are far brighter than that. I'm talking to the nitwits that say stupid shit like that. Wood is biodegradable. There would be no intact wooden slave ships today from that time. All right. Let's get that part straight. Now let's deal with the main part of what the sister was saying there. She says there's no way to get from Africa to here, North America, on a boat. Got bad news for you, baby. Got bad news for you. Actually, there's sea trade routes today, the Cape of Good Hope being one of them, and me being a former Navy man, you ain't nothing you can tell me about sea, okay? Because I spent lots of time out at it, all right? The Cape of Good Hope now is the current safest region. Now, they're not using the Suez Canal route anymore for security reasons, but goods and services come over here on cargo ships all the time, young lady, okay? There's shipping manifests and everything that could tell you about that. But see, I feel bad for young people that, you know, because look, she means well. She thought she was cooking. Because if you're ignorant of something, you just don't know. And I'm not calling her stupid. She is ignorant, okay? Now, stupidity, again, would be when people present you with something and it's wisdom, it's verifiable, you can verify it for yourself, and you still refuse to accept wisdom. Now you've graduated to stupidity. So I just want to be clear on that, all right? And trust me, everything that we go over tonight, I'm going to put in the pinned comment after the broadcast and in the description box, okay? We're finna get a whole lot of education over here tonight. So first, let's go ahead and get started with some of this education, all right? Now, for anybody that chooses to watch, whether it's Mr. Austin Holloman, etc., we're going to get started with a piece of this education here debunking this Irish slave myth, all right? Back to business, I'm going to put that first article in the chat room about 3 good times, so don't worry if you didn't get it in the chat room, if you didn't catch this broadcast live. Every single thing that I show you here tonight will be in the description box and the pinned comment after this broadcast is over. So let's get started cooking with hot fish grease, all right? Slavery myths here. This is from the article, the publication, The Slate. All right. Slavery myths debunked. The Irish were slaves too. Now, we all know where this comes from. A lot of the white supremacists, and that sounded like that's where Austin been hanging out. I can't verify it. But according to what you're about to hear tonight, you're going to be like, yeah, you kind of got that from the white folks, didn't you? I guess, you know, because some people may not be aware completely of the anti-black racist culture online where you have a lot of the, you know, mayonnaise people, of the white supremacist persuasion, repeating false history and just making up stuff. And some of them probably actually believe it, but I hate to break it to them. No, no, history debunks that. And we're going to get started talking about that here tonight. So slavery myths debunked. The Irish were slaves too. Slaves had it better than northern factory workers. Black people fought for the Confederacy, and other lies, halves, truths, and irrelevancies. Okay. So now you will be able to find that in the article that I put in the chat room there, okay? And as you see this famous picture here, we all know of this slave here. You should know his name, all right? They presented that, and I'm gonna show you something. First, let me put this up here as well, all right? Take that one down, put this up here as well. I'll read it before I go ahead and give you the Cliff Notes version of why this Irish were slaves too is a bunch of bullshit, okay? So, from the same article that you'll find in the chat, is it true? If we're talking about slavery as it was practiced on Africans in the United States, that is hereditary chattel slavery, then the answer is a clear no. Okay, we're going to get back to why in a minute. As a historian and public librarian, Liam Hogan writes in a paper titled The Myth of Irish Slaves in the Colonies. Persons from Ireland have been held in various forms of human bondage throughout history, but they have never been chattel slaves in the West Indies, nor is there any evidence of Irish chattel slavery in Northern American colonies. There were a large number of Irish indentured servants, completely different from a slave, And there were cases in which Irish men and women were sentenced to indentured servitude in the New World, usually for a period of 4 to 7 years, and forcibly shipped across the Atlantic. But even involuntary laborers had more autonomy than enslaved Africans, and the large majority of Irish indentured servants came here voluntarily. Voluntarily, okay? There was nothing voluntary about American chattel slavery with our ancestors, foundational Black American freedmen, okay? Furthermore, the difference between a slave and an indentured servant, you need to understand something. They came here voluntarily under contractual agreements, and they were paid. There was no contracts with those of our ancestors that was on them plantations. They wouldn't let go 4 to 7 years, okay? So no, the Irish were not slaves. Now, I wanted to present that early on to you because Mr. Holloman here, he's about to show you, his type of reasoning. And, I'm going to play it and we're going to stop it, you know what I'm saying, to break certain things down because, again, I am not picking on this young man. I find it sad when people don't have proper education on certain things, especially something involving your own lineage and history, okay? So I'm going to do my best to use this as a teaching moment here tonight. Let's go ahead and get started. And like I said, I'll be stopping this in certain places where need be to further elaborate on things with the truth.
It's not unique to Africa, as many people may want you to think. Slavery in Europe. Irish were the first slaves in the United States. They were brought to the United States as slaves as the first slaves. So Irish slavery was under the English rule during Cromwell's conquest in 1649, led to tens of thousands of Irish being...
See, now you heard him talking about 1649 and talking about the Irish were the first slaves brought over here. Now, family, we all know in 1526, okay, them folks came over here and tried to start colonies and failed, okay? They didn't have no Irish slaves with them in 1526. See, look, y'all, what you about to hear this young man say, some of you may crack jokes in the chat, but you're going to find it very sad because I'm going to let him talk in his own words and I'm going to stop to correct certain things with accurate information as need be. Let's let him continue.
Being sold to the Caribbeans and to the Caribbean colonies and the American colonies in the Americas, basically, is what I'm saying. 1650 to 1700, 30 to 50,000 Irish were shipped to the colonies as slaves. In Nazi Germany, Hitler enslaved, and this is recent, this is less than 100 years ago, Hitler enslaved millions during World War II, which were French prisoners of war. The same thing happened to the Americans or the Allied troops in Japan. They were slaves as well. Polish were slaves. Russians, the Soviets, they were slaves under Hitler. Romas, known as the gypsies, they were slaves. And of course the Jews. They were the majority of that group.
Now, you can tell, and again, the young man didn't say what source he got that from, but being a thorough historian myself and have been covering this type of stuff for years on this platform and many others, family, I'm going to tell you where it sounds like he's reading this from. He sounds like he's getting this from some of these white supremacist websites, and he probably doesn't even know that's what it is that he was getting it from, because this is the same stuff that they repeat verbatim that has been debunked by their own scholars and many others throughout history, okay? Let's deal with one of the main things I see here with Mr. Holloman's disposition, all right? He keeps trying to conflate people being under occupation with actual chattel slavery. Big difference, okay? Those two are not the same thing. When Hitler occupied France, okay, he did not put them in chattel slavery. The Third Reich took over a lot of their stuff, but they did not put them on plantations like he did our ancestors. He seems to be having trouble understanding that. You heard him mention other groups of people. They were not on plantations either. Being under occupation and being in chattel slavery is two different damn things, okay? Two different things. And then, of course, you saw he mentioned at the end there that Hitler had the Jews enslaved. No, that's incorrect also. Hitler did not enslave the Jews. He was trying to exterminate the Jews. That's what he was doing. He wasn't saying, because think about it. See, Austin, if you're listening to anybody else, this is where reading actual things that would pertain to what you're talking about will help you out. I've read Mein Kampf, and I've read many other documents going back to the Third Reich, etc. Now, on surface level, even if you're not up to speed on that type of scholarship, you know, if you know anything about Adolf Hitler, he was trying to create a master race, and he saw the Jews as inferior, okay? He wasn't trying to keep them around to enslave them. He murdered them in the millions. He didn't keep them in little camps to have them work. No, the camps were, okay, you stay here until we can execute you. The only thing that you could compare and say came close to like being enslaved would be if you looked at the treasonous Judenrat. And if you don't know who the Judenrat was, those were Jewish people that turned on their own and helped put their own in the gas chambers. And you saw how that worked out for them. They ended up being the next ones in the gas chamber as well. Okay. So, you know, you can see where his logic is going with this. And this is sad. Like I said, I'm not going to speak on that man's family situation or his upbringing, but I guess there was just not any teachers there because, you know, as I showed you earlier from those screenshots, he was saying that nobody taught us about these things. And I had to correct him. No, my brother, you're on your own with that. Many of us were taught about these things before we went to school. OK, I'm going to tell y'all something. One of the problems that, you know, my parents had with me is like, you know, they're like, boy, just go in there and pass the test. We know there's a bunch of BS, but that's what they teaching, you know, because I was a guy like, hey, no, it's not. That's not right. And could prove what I said. You know, a lot of teachers had a problem with me because, you know, I was a kid that was taught things before I went to school, and I was into learning and speaking the truth. OK, it took me a while to adjust to that. You know what I'm saying? But again, everybody didn't have it that way. We're going to further let him continue here, and you're going to see the further flaws in his logic here, because this is my point of contention. Austin, if you happen to find this, it wasn't the other stuff you was asking me about, which had minor inaccuracies. I'm talking about this whole, the Irish were slaves thing. Let's let it continue.
Over 12 million forced laborers were used in Nazi-occupied Europe. So they enslaved around 12 million people. Not to mention there were black people in those camps as well, and gays that were slaves in there as well. Auschwitz and other camps function both as extermination camps, which pretty means a death camp, and slave labor. So these people were captured by the Nazis, and then the Nazis forced them to build weapons to go capture other people, basically.
Okay, that's true, but they didn't keep them in them camps as long as they kept our people on the plantations, okay? Because, like, again, he didn't say it, but he appears to be trying to conflate oppression and temporary captivity with chattel slavery over here in America's like we experience. You can tell, you're gonna be able to tell that by the way he keeps talking here. Let's let him get back to
it. Slavery in Asia, in the Middle East. These people had slaves as well. Especially considering the fact with the Arabs coming to Africa to get that's the Middle East too. So Chinese dynasties used slaves, often prisoners of war or a form of repaying debt. The Indian caste system, which still exists today, if you guys don't know what it is, it's a caste system of like priests, and then there's a middle class kind of worker thing. I think there's 3 or 4, but at the bottom are the dark-skinned Indians. They call them the untouchables.
Yes, that is one of the media terms, Austin. They're called untouchables, but the actual name of the people you're talking about, young man, are called the Dalit people, okay? Yes, the Dalit people in India have it the worst. They are the lowest caste system over there. They beat them people to death on sight, okay? Male, female, I mean, with that caste system stuff, there's several countries around the world that have that. You can't buy your way out of that. You can't educate your way out of that. You were just born into this caste, and that's what you must be. Okay? These people can't even just sit down and eat. Now, the reasons behind that, I will have to do an entire broadcast on that if y'all want to know, but it's very sad. Very, very uncivilized thing. I mean, they got it rough. The only people in India that have it worse than the Dalit people would be their women, okay? Again, that is a whole nother conversation for another day, but I just wanted to give y'all the actual name of the people that he's talking about. So let it continue.
Literally, they're not supposed to touch anybody. And their kids and their parents and themselves permanently forever until, I guess, they decide to get rid of the system. I don't know if they will. No clue that they will forever be slaves. And there's nothing they can do about it. The Ottoman Empire, Turkey, enslaved Balkan Christians, Slavs, and the Caucasians, right? Or it says Kirgizans. I don't know how you say, but I think it's the Caucasians what they mean to say. The Arab slave trade lasted over 1,000 years, and it involved Africans, Slavs, and even some Europeans. And at one point, in Tunisia, they even enslaved white people. At that time, they were black, and they enslaved white people. Vikings would go and kill, rape, and murder a bunch of people in one place, and then they would also take some of them as slaves. So slavery, just like prostitution, slavery is one of the oldest professions in the world, and it's not going anywhere. Slavery still exists today.
Now you see the mistake that he's making here. And notice, like, you know, his tone while he's describing this. Again, yes, this young man is of our lineage. All right. He was born here in America. His people are from Texas, from what I understand him to say. So everybody's like, anybody can say, oh, he's a teller. No, he's not. No, he's not. He's just highly uneducated and ignorant about a lot of things. Family. Boy. When it comes to this particular subject, trying to, because he's basically saying, well, everybody was enslaved. And you can tell where he got that rhetoric from. That's the argument that a lot of white supremacists use. Well, everybody was enslaved. No, everybody was not forced into chattel slavery for 250 years like us, okay? No other group on the planet has had that experience but us. Now, the reason why that argument is one that we don't entertain, because here, those violinists that are seeking reparations, we are not talking about what other governments did, what other people went through. We're talking about the American government that owes our people, foundational Black American freedmen, reparations. Everybody else, they got to handle their own business where they are. This government, this nation was founded off the back and free labor of our people. That's the one that we are concerned with, this government. The same one that enslaved us that exists today, okay? So we're not talking about, well, everybody else was enslaved too. And I'm going to say this, look, I'm trying not to speak on this man's family situation. I will say this, though, if this was my child, there's no way I would let him come up and be this ignorant of his people's history, okay? You can't do this. So, again, we're going to put the information out here for anybody that wants to learn it. But I'm going to let him continue talking so you can further kind of see what his issue is here with his lack of information and lack of actual scholarship. So let it continue.
Usually in the Philippines, you know, there's been reports in Southeast Asia and China. Like, this stuff is not a secret. So it's not exclusive to black people. I'm not saying I'm black. I'm a descendant of a slave, you know, at some point. And we can't start that FBA shit and say that, I'm not a descendant of a slave. I'm an FBA. So we can't say that.
Now, see, this is the part where I wish I would have been able to question the brother and ask him, okay, where did you hear that those of us who are foundational Black American freedmen say that we're not descendants of slaves? That's the entire argument we have against the United States government. Because again, Austin, for you that like to say, well, you don't know what happened back then. Yes, young man, there's a thing called 1870 census where you can trace your lineage back to it if you are a foundational Black American freedman. And the FBA shit is not a club or something you can join. Either you are of our lineage or you're not. Okay, so let's get that straight with disrespect towards our people's lineage, which is your own. Okay, what I understand, both of his parents are foundational Black American. All right. So now, the argument that he's gonna make, I want y'all to see where this is going, because it sounds like to me, and I can only guess, only he can confirm this. It sounds like he kind of got mixed up with that Dane Calloway crowd. You know what I'm saying? That kind of what it sounds like. Because if you've been around these spaces long enough, you can kind of tell where people get some of their rhetoric, and it sounds like he's kind of been around that Dane Calloway crowd. If that's the case, Austin, if you happen to see this, and I don't really care whether you do or not, but if you do, what Dane Calloway got going on and don't have nothing to do with those of us who are foundational Black American freedmen. Did Dane Calloway run around talking about Harriet Tubman was made up silly stuff? Again, you can verify that Harriet Tubman, and by the way, that wasn't her real name. We all know what her real name was, okay? Arminta Ross, you can look up and see where she had actual documentation and received a pension and all of that. I mean, look, I could do a whole broadcast on that. All right. So again, it sounds like he's been in spaces where he's conflating information. I'm like, no, brother, none of us have ever said or denied that we are, the descendants of enslaved people. You see what I'm saying? See, look, I'm going to tell you something I was taught to do as a child. Before you speculate on something, try to get accurate information. You go talk to somebody, you know what I'm saying, that knows about what you're talking about. You don't just hear something and go off hearsay. I was trained as a child and later in the military to verify the things that you hear, okay? If you value accurate information, all right? Now, if you want to run around in ignorance and then later somebody like myself has to come along and debunk all this foolishness, that's on you. You're free to do that. That is a choice as well. However, these inaccuracies will not go without challenge. Let's let it continue.
And I just broke down how everywhere in the world has enslaved other people.
Foundational Black American freedmen is not connected to every other lineage around the world. Our justice claim for reparations is here with the American government. So that has nothing to do with us, young man. Okay? I want y'all to further see where he's about to go with this. I mean, y'all try not to laugh because it's not funny. It really isn't. You see, I'm exercising restraint over here. I'm not cracking jokes. We gonna teach over here tonight. Let's let it continue.
Even if your family lineage traces back 1,000,000 years ago in the United States and nobody ever left, per se, you are truly that FBA thing.
Notice how he keeps referring to our lineage as a thing, a FBA thing. No, sir, it's a lineage. It's not a thing. And, obviously you can do what you want, but I'm going to say this to you. If you're not going around disrespecting other people's lineages and cultures, talking about it's a thing, why would you do that towards your own people? Just a question, but I mean, hey, he's got a lot to learn in life at 24, like many people did. Let's let it continue.
You don't think that Native Americans enslaved other Native Americans to do the stuff they needed? You think that just because they're from the Americas, there's these good people that didn't do any wrong? Really? Be realistic. It's a human thing. Africans were victims, participants, and profiteers. It just depends on what angle you're looking at it from.
Now that part he did get correct. And we're going to prove that later here tonight too as well.
The Europeans were not the first to enslave people. And they were not the last slave owners. As I said before, the Arabs they started it. And it ended with the Arabs. So it's not only Europeans.
No, the Arabs started it and it ended with the British. Arabs, Portuguese, and British. No, young man, history does not agree with you on that. That's what you think from whatever sources he's reading off of over there. And look, again, I'm going to provide my information, okay? I've given you, in fact, the business, you know what? I'm gonna provide you all some sources right now in conjunction with the article I just gave you earlier in the chat, okay? And that's these are articles that further debunk that Irish slave trade crap, okay? Because, you know, I ain't done with that yet. I'm gonna make sure that any young person that finds this broadcast tonight, I'm gonna make sure that you have a thorough understanding on it, not just from watching me, but it will give you a basis to go and do the research yourself and see that what I told you was actually correct. So again, the origin and the chronology of the transatlantic slave trade, or the slave trade itself: Arabs, Portuguese, British. No, it didn't start with the Arabs, and no, it didn't end with them. Incorrect. Let's let it continue.
The way our school would teach. The same nations that benefited from slavery turn around and colonize the African kingdoms that they once traded with.
Yes, my sister Netta J, you must be joining us late. Yes, this is Austin Holloman, the passport guy, as you said. Probably came in a little bit late, my sister, but yes, this is he. We're going to educate him on many things that he was talking about here tonight that he got inaccurate regarding the Irish being slaves in America and a lot more. So yes, this is that person.
And some of those systems of exploitation still exist today. For example, in Libya, after Gaddafi was assassinated, a slave trade kicked off. Again, that is still unfortunately existing today. In Mauritania, which is a country many people don't know, I believe there's an estimated 800,000 people believed to be enslaved there. So it still exists, unfortunately. So let me know what you guys think. I hope you guys learned something new. And also, a lot of you guys love the Moors. Y'all love the Moors so damn much. Even they had slaves. Here's what you need to know about them. The Moors were Muslim peoples of North Africa, Berber and Arab origin, in that Tunisia region, who ruled to parts of Spain and Portugal. They were the first. They were, from my understanding, they were the only intercontinental, somewhat colonizers that were African. They colonized the Iberian Peninsula. They added street lights hundreds of years before London had street lights. They taught them philosophy, science, etc. They educated those people, and because of that, because these Moors are Arab kind of looking, right? That's the reason why Brazilians and people in South America, they look similar to people from the Middle East because they share this common ancestor. Because these people walked up to Spain and Portugal, colonized them, and then the Reconquista pushed them back out, and then those people colonized South America, or the Americas. So that's why if you were to get a hijab and put it over a Latino, or a Latina, I should say, it would look very similar to somebody that's in Saudi Arabia, because they share a common ancestor. Do your research on that. They ruled in Spain and Portugal.
Now, again, he has some things correct, but the Moors did not put anybody in chattel slavery, okay? See, these terms matter. See, the thing that you will notice with the young man here, he kind of has the attitude where he tries to play semantics, and I'm not just doing that. There's a difference between American chattel slavery and people taking captives for a certain measure of time and then letting them go. That is not the same thing that our ancestors went through, and it's disrespectful to allow anybody to claim that it was. And he doesn't realize that some of that information that he was getting earlier was from the white supremacist websites. I know him when I hear him, okay? Now, what he's saying here in general, this is true. I'm going to give him credit where he gets things right, okay? He's just got a lot of gaps that he needs to have filled about what happened, why it happened, and to make sure that he doesn't conflate captivity, okay, after temporary captivity rather, with actual chattel slavery that our people were born into, which was basically hereditary. Big difference. Let's let it continue.
Go from 711 to 1492. They established powerful states like Al-Andalus and built advanced cities like, sorry if I said that wrong, like Cordoba, Seville, and Granada. Did they have slaves? Yes. The enslavement of Europeans is what I was bringing up earlier. The Moors frequently raided Christian territories in Spain and southern Europe for slaves. White Europeans, especially Spaniards and Portuguese and even Italians, were taken as slaves and concubines. Christian captives were used for labor, ransom, or domestic service in both Iberia and North Africa, as I said before. Moors were deeply involved in the trans-Saharan slave trade, moving black African slaves across the desert into Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Islamic Spain at that time. These slaves consisted of eunuchs in palaces, domestic servants, laborers, and sub-Saharan Africans used as soldiers like the Black Guard in Morocco. Slavery in Muslim Spain was legal under Islamic law during the Moorish rule in Spain. Moors kept Christian slaves from Europe, African slaves from the south, and some Jews were also enslaved during times of political tension. Female slaves were often kept as concubines following the Islamic customs. After the Reconquista, Christian kingdoms took Spain back, and many Moors were themselves enslaved or expelled. Usually this is the same cycle that we're seeing everywhere. You enslave somebody, it lasts a couple hundred years, and then somebody enslaves you. We just saw that with the Moors, we saw that with the sub-Saharan Africans, and we've seen it with the Europeans. I had to do my research if it happened to the Arabs too. But I know with the Europeans, they enslaved sub-Saharan Africans and Irish and maybe some other people. And then Hitler went back and enslaved those same people. So it doesn't work long term. You guys, let's go ahead.
Okay, so you heard what he had to say there. And like I said, in general, he has some things right. But my point of contention was with that Irish slave issue, okay? All right. Well, we ain't done with that, though, because I want you to hear him further in his own words here. He's about to regale us with more of what he thinks he knows. Hold on to your horses, okay? Because I'm going to let him do a good bit of talking, then I'm going to come in and correct things that he's talking about here, okay? Let's let him continue.
Go ahead and put this FBA discussion back on the board again. Because now that I'm doing historical videos, people seem to have a lot to say about anything that I say. And I'm used to that, but it seems like now everything is about me either being too young or I need to learn my history. I'm an internet scholar. So let's go ahead and get into what FBA is. I'm going to give it a fair assessment this time. FBA stands for Foundational Black Americans. It's a term popularized by Tariq Nasheed, and it refers to Black Americans who are descendants of American slavery, meaning their lineage traces back to Africans enslaved in the United States. So just reading that based off of what that says, I would fit into that category. Now, at the same time, these same people that claim to be part of this FBA stuff also say that they're Indians. Or you guys have heard me call it the Featherheads. They call it that as well. And they walk around and ride horses with feathers on top of their head. They also do that. FBA emphasizes cultural lineage, reparations, and separating the unique historical struggles of Black Americans from more recent Black immigrants. Basically creating a hierarchy. Let's talk about the gatekeeping blackness argument, which is one of the issues that I've had the entire time, and I'll tell you why. Many FBAs say non-FBA black people steal the culture, hip-hop, slang, civil rights movements, while not contributing. So what they're basically saying is non-African, non-Black Americans, which could be somebody from Brazil, Africa, Colombia, Britain, not France, non-Black Americans, as long as they're Black, basically, but they're not in America, they basically steal our culture. Now, if we want to put it in specific with Africans, I know exactly what y'all are talking about when y'all say that. I hear it all the time when I hear Africans use the word nigga, and we can just say that's part of our culture in the United States, because we were the first ones to start saying that shit, from my understanding, in a casual way. We could say that's one way of taking some things. Like when I was in South Africa, I seen some dudes sagging pants and wearing snapbacks to the back. That's some stuff that we started, right? But there's also stuff that we got from them. I mean, they are African. And if you are FBA descendant of a slave, then you must have some connection to the transatlantic slave trade, correct? Oh, my bad. I forgot y'all are.
So now you hear where he's going, right? Oh, yeah, I know, family. I know. So let me go ahead and get straight to brass tacks on addressing this, right? I would like for Austin Holloman or anybody else that claims that we got things culturally from continental Africans, Caribbean people, or wherever, to show me where this exists. And I'm not talking about anything regarding entertainment or a festival here or there. I'm talking about in our everyday lives. Where do you see foundational Black American freedmen people trying to be anybody but ourselves? And no disrespect to my non-FBA brothers and sisters that are on code, my Caribbean and continental African brothers and sisters, I have no problem with you as long as you respect us. We respect you back. But for the most part, we don't go around trying to emulate them. Case in point, before I let the young man continue, if they start a dance craze over in any of the 54 nations of Africa, okay, I've been to over 25 of them myself, all right? If they start any type of dance craze or trend down in the Caribbean, we don't latch on to that. It's usually the other way around globally. Yes, many people culture vulture off of us, all right? And some people emulate our culture because it's naturally trendy and they like it. I've been all over Asia. I've been all over Europe. I've been all over the continent of Africa. I've been down to Australia. I have seen this with my own eyes, okay? So I know firsthand how our slang, even our hairstyles, these people try to emulate. Everybody want to be like us, but don't nobody want to be us or stand by us, especially over here in America when it's time to produce justice. All right, that's one of the things we have a problem with, especially here in our country. When the tether class, notice I said class, because not all people that are non-FBA are tethers, they try to undermine us, like the Winsome Sears, okay? Or, you know what I'm saying, people that get in these offices, like, or run for office, like Austin Chingay talking about you're going to remove Black History Month. First of all, Black History is year-round, but the audacity of a Nigerian to come over here and be running for governor talking about what he's going to remove from our culture. Then you have the Candace Owens, okay, that come over here in the media sector undermining our people. All right. I mean, so, you know, that's who we're talking about when we said tether class. That's the only people we have a problem with. Now, I want you to see where this young man is about to go with his argument here, okay, before I go ahead and poke some holes in it with truth. Let's let it continue.
They just enslaved those people and they just made up fucking 500 years of history. I'm going to ask you guys a question. Is Black culture only valid if it originates from American soil? Answer that in the comments for me. I don't know.
Yes, it's only authentic if it comes from foundational Black American freedmen. If it's our culture, foundational Black American culture originates here. All that other stuff people emulating and trying to do and trying to cosplay as us, no, that is not the real deal. That is not the real McCoy. So I'm going to go ahead and answer that for him right now. I don't have to be in your comment section, okay? We gonna get it straight all over here tonight, okay? So I want y'all to hear where else he's about to go with this. Boy, hold on to your hats. I'm telling you, man. Look, I know y'all got jokes, but again, this is more so to teach, not to ridicule, and not even to teach him, because I recognize when someone can't be taught. This is for anybody that come across that bad information. They'll be able to compare what I'm showing them here tonight versus what he was talking about. So let it continue.
Answer. The divide and conquer criticism. Some FBA ideology divides the diaspora rather than unites it. Like I said before, we're busy accusing every other ethnicity of black that they want to be like us, which may be true, may not be true. I also don't go to bed sleeping and thinking about that shit.
Now, you are ignorant again in your assessment if you think that our only bone of contention with people that are non-FBA is them trying to emulate our culture. People can emulate whatever they want to try to emulate. Our pet peeve is when you come over here to this country and you try to undermine our fight for reparations, an anti-black hate crime bill. You not us, but you speaking for us, talking about what we shouldn't have. If you find yourself in Congress or in the Senate or any place like that, in a governorship, mayorship, whatever, that's what we're concerned with. Now, Austin, I don't know what circles you've been or what you think you've heard, but apparently you are quite confused on that. And, you know, someone like him would choose to remain confused, and that's his business. That's his choice also. But when you come out here online just spewing things, and let's be clear, don't think that it's not lost on me that when he mentioned Tariq Nasheed's name, he's doing this to try to get views and attention. As far as I'm concerned, this is going to be the last time I address it, because we're going to get everything straight over here tonight that we need to about the things that he made. And if he chooses to go on and be ignorant about that, that's his business. But anybody that comes over here is going to get accurate information, okay? Because see, that let me tell you why this is important beyond him, okay? It is important for particularly Gen Z and Gen Alpha to have accurate information on our history and geopolitics worldwide, because they're moving into the future of our people, and white supremacy and racism, which is global, has not vanished. They're going to unfortunately have to be burdened with dealing with that system. Now, if you're dealing with that system from a place of ignorance, you are even more vulnerable to it than people that have information about the system of white supremacy and how it works, okay? So that's why I'm doing this here tonight. That's the importance of that. You can't have young people like this young man here running around being ignorant about certain things, because you can choose to be, but that system is not ignorant of you, no matter where you go on the planet, okay? So that's the main reason why we're going to cover this over here tonight. Let's get back to it.
I don't know if I give a damn about what somebody else is doing enough to be online starting this other stuff. Then they also, I've told you guys examples before. Well, I've heard this black American woman, she was dumb. She was sitting in the car and she said that we're not African because I got this sparkle in my eye, and Africans, you don't have that sparkle. We have this sparkle in our eye. That's your best justification. Are we tearing each other?
Now, again, he seems to be using the most ignorant of things he can find to say, okay, that's what every foundational black American person believes. It's over 43 million of us, okay? And it's going to be ignorance in everybody's lineage and culture. But what I don't like about anybody, whether it's people in our lineage or outside of it, you go and cherry pick the most ignorant person you can find and then use that as a blanket statement for everybody. Now, that makes you look even more ignorant when you do that, okay? So, you know, like I said, the jokes write themselves with this, but I'm going to restrain myself from cracking jokes because it's easy, but it's a lot more work to be done here on a more purposeful sense with this. Let's get back to it.
Others communities down between DNA testing flags. I already told y'all before, if you ask me, it doesn't matter if you're from Africa, South America, or the United States, y'all are all niggas in white folks' eyes. So I don't see what's the big divide about it.
I'm going to tell you what the big divide about it is, Mr. Holloman. The big divide about it is, first of all, if it was just that and everybody was just black, African, whatever you want to call yourself, and we had that commonality, that would be a great thing. The problem, Mr. Holloman, is over here and over there where you are on the continent. When it comes to how we view white supremacy, it's different. It does not matter how the white supremacists view us as all the same. That's the part you need to tell some of your continental African brethren over there that you mingle with, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, he says he doesn't lose sleep about these types of things, so I wouldn't expect him to do that. But to answer your question, young man, that is the difference. Our mentality towards the system of white supremacy. A lot of the tether class, and I will not put all continental Africans or Caribbean people in the tether class. I'm talking about that tether class amongst them. A lot of continental Africans and Caribbean people, they do not see white supremacy as something to fight. They see it as something to assimilate and bow down to. Assimilate into it or bow down to it. This is why you get the Myron Gaines and the Candace Owens that come over here. You think they're going to fight white supremacy? They'll say whatever white people are saying 1 minute, and then as soon as they turn on that, they'll agree with that. They're basically trained parrots who are afraid to fight the system. We are the only people, when you really look at it, as a collective, that are still standing 10 toes down against the system of white supremacy. Everybody else seems to capitulate to it or want to assimilate into it. We have not done that over here as a collective of people. I'm not talking about the individual Sambos amongst us. I am talking about the collective. Case in point, our good brother and warrior father, Mr. Rodney Hinton, has proven that. This happens to any of these other groups over here, they just eat it. Everybody ain't gonna let you take their children from them. You know, I've said this for years. When you take somebody's child from them, that's an open declaration of war. But we will cover that in a future broadcast. But to answer Mr. Holloman's question, that is the difference, Austin. Over here in America particularly, yes, we are concerned with that. That is a problem. If we are trying to get reparations, an anti-black hate crime bill, protect ourselves from these race soldiers, then you have the likes of that I showed you on a previous broadcast a couple of days back. The Philip Andersons and the Myron Gaines over here. Oh, yeah, you damn right. We going to have a problem with that. This is why we delineate. Delineation is life or death for us over here in this country at this point. When you see the Proud Boys and they have them black women, so-called black women as girls, a lot of them are tethers. You don't have no foundational black American freedman woman that's going to go openly date no damn white supremacists. That's one thing I will say for most of our sisters. Most of them are not going to be with no open white supremacists, and they know it. So that's the difference. The mentality, okay? The mentality towards the system of white supremacy is the main difference, Austin. That's our point of contention, not what you were talking about. Let's let it continue.
The next thing, immigration xenophobia. Yes. Basically, FBAs, if you ask me, give off I'm not saying that y'all are this. Y'all give off this very Malcolm X militant white nationalist vibe, but you're just black, basically.
Okay, so if we did give off vibes like our ancestors, warrior scholar Malcolm, how would that be a bad thing, young man? Perhaps you really need to do your research on who Brother Malcolm was, because you said that like that would be a bad thing. How in the hell do you put Malcolm in the same sentence with white nationalists? The two of those things do not go together at all. They contradict each other. See, you can kind of tell how poorly he was educated here, because let me ask my audience, family, any of you in this chat room, when the last time you ever heard anybody from our lineage or anybody put Malcolm X and white nationalists in the same sentence? Because I get what he called himself trying to do, but boy, you talk about a hell of an oxymoron right there. An oxymoronic statement, if ever I heard one, was that. Have any of you in my chat room ever heard anybody mention Malcolm in the same sentence with white nationalists? Now, I'll be his huckleberry, I'll bite. Basically, what you're trying to say is Malcolm had a nationalistic point of view through the Nation of Islam, and you say white nationalists do. So let me go ahead and explain to you the difference, young man, and anybody else that happens to have that inclination of thought. The difference is, for those of us who are black people, especially foundational black American freedmen, when we surround ourselves and we say black power or have a sense of nationalistic pride, we're not talking about going out lynching people, hanging them, or harming them. The white nationalists, on the other part, they do that. They have historically done that, Austin. You may or may not know this, but they lynched our ancestors back in the day. They're still trying to do it today in different forms. Sometimes it's a figurative lynching. Sometimes it is a literal lynching. I've covered those stories for years here on this channel. Okay? So those are the differences. White people are talking about white pride and white power. There's domestic terrorism behind that. Not just from the days of the KKK. We're talking about right here in 2025. But see, young man, you are so detached from that, and you're over in Kenya now. And again, I cannot speak to your level of education in high school or college, okay? I cannot speak to what books you've read by any of our grandmaster teachers, if any. He probably would not have read any of the scholarship of Dr. John Henry Clark, Sheikh Anta Diop, okay? Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, Dr. Claude Anderson, our living scholars, Dr. Randy Short, Dr. James Small, okay? I could go on and on. I would not be surprised if any of the scholarship of those grandmaster teachers would escape this young man, okay? I wouldn't be surprised if he's read some Thomas Sowell, though. I'm surprised he hadn't mentioned him. You know what I'm saying? He probably all up to date on this Thomas Sowell. What y'all think, family? Again, I can't confirm that, but I'm just speculating. Anywho, we're going to let him continue here. Yeah, because he's got a lot to tell us. He's going to get us told, family.
FBAs often oppose immigration from Africa, correct, from the Caribbean, correct, claiming it waters down Black American interests. Is it fair to blame the immigrants, or do you need to be blaming the American government? I don't know the answer. You tell me in the comments.
It's not about blaming anybody. It's about, like I said before, if they come over here and they're in positions of government and they're undermining our people, that's our point of contention right there. Okay, it's not about blaming somebody or sitting up, oh, they do this, they do that. But But see, he's detached from any Black grassroots movements over here in this lineage, so he wouldn't know exactly what we're doing or what's going on. You know what I'm saying? Speaking from a place of ignorance and youth, all right? And, he hates for people to tell him that, but, brother, that's the truth. You're young and you're very ignorant of things that are going on over here right now. Chances are you've never paid attention to these things. Just because I'm aware of how this young man's demeanor is, the reason why I'm making that statement, I don't care about this, I don't care about that, that's fine. That's fine. That is your right to choose not to care. I will tell you and anyone else that has that disposition, though, this, don't be surprised if you go that way for so long and then you come back around your people when you need them, if they exhibit the same behavior towards you. And don't be surprised. I mean, I've seen it happen. There's a lot going on with this delineation movement. See, let's be clear on something. When we say delineate, the first thing comes to mind is from the tether class, and that includes the white tether class because they didn't come over. They're not indigenous to this land either, okay? The Europeans, they're not. The white adjacent to the class, the Asians, the Hispanics, the East Indians, the Arabs that come over here and are classified as white. And that also includes the Sambos and Coons amongst us too. Now, y'all know me. One of the things I do, I give the young people a pass because, like I said earlier in this broadcast, many people can be ignorant until they're taught. So you should have some patience to a certain degree for the young people. But now when that transitions from ignorance to just full-blown stupidity or outright treason or disrespect of our ancestors, oh, that's another issue altogether. Now you over there with them folks, and all your help will come from over there. So I'm just saying, that's where most of us are with that today. You know what I'm saying? And it's not just my generation. That's across the board. All right? The greater majority of our people, that's what type of time we on with this delineation movement. Now, I'm just saying, you choose your own fate in this life. You are the author of your own fate by your own hand. So choose it wisely. Let's let him continue.
Reparations. FBAs want reparations only for those whose ancestors were enslaved in the United States. Rightfully so. I don't know why some guy from South Sudan would move to the United States and be included in the reparations for something that somebody in my family 200 years ago went through. I can agree with that. They should be lineage-based and not race-based. The same reason that if something happened here, or if I was living in Rwanda and they decided to give reparations to the whole Rwanda for the genocide, I should not be included in that. I'm not even Rwandan. Makes perfect sense.
Now, he seems to be talking with some sense on this issue. Perhaps he did a bit more scholarship because for the chronology of it all, this video was done after the one that I just showed you a portion of there with my bone of contention about that Irish being slaves. So maybe he did his research on that. Now he's talking with some sense there. He's going to say something else, though, that I'm going to have to correct him on. And that's going to be coming up shortly. Let's let him continue.
But keep in mind, some people have tried to argue that this would exclude Black people whose families have lived in the United States for decades, but do not have documented slave ancestry. So, for the FBAs that want reparations, and the white folks know when these white people hear reparations, they're thinking, oh, these people from the transatlantic slave trade, and that's their heritage, so we should give them reparations. Which is basically the logic that y'all are making, and that's what they would think.
No, wrong again, young man. The greater majority of white America, when we say reparations, they think we're talking about all black people here in this country. And we are not. Like you said earlier, and like we have been saying long before you started talking on this, Austin, reparations are lineage based to those of us that can trace our ancestry back to that 1870 census, okay? And immigrants can't do that. So they're not foundational black American if they can't trace at least one biological parent, your mother or your father, back, your mother, your father's people, you can't trace them back to that 1870 census, then you are not foundational black American. It's just that simple. And my good brother Kermit S. Wingfield, to make sure I'm clear, Austin is a foundational black American. He had just traveled to Kenya, okay? I want to make that clear because I hear a lot of people making the same mistake, and I can kind of see why about O'Shea Duke Jackson. Believe it or not, O'Shea is not a continental African. He is not a tether. His people are from Sacramento, California. Me and him don't sit horses on a great many issues, but I just want to confirm that as well, okay? I know what I'm talking about on that. So again, to make sure everybody that's just coming in, this is not a tether. He is foundational black American freedman on both sides of his family. He's just traveled to Kenya. He chooses to be over there, and that's his right. You know what I'm saying? No, I don't have no issue with nobody traveling wherever they find their peace at. But my point of contention here tonight is on these historical inaccuracies about this Irish slavery and things involving our lineage. So I'm going to let him continue here before I have to correct something else that he's saying.
But while you're busy being a Native American and not being related to Africans at all, guess what? Making those kind of statements would exclude you from your own interest of wanting reparations. So I don't.
No, sir, it would not. That's from your limited understanding of what you're saying, Mr. Holloman. Mr. Holloman, let me break it down to you simple, right? Because I want this to be simple enough to where a 5-year-old can understand it. Austin, those of us that can trace our ancestry back to the 1870 census are foundational black American freedmen. We say freedmen because that is the legal term used in court documents where our people are addressed as freedmen. Okay? Y'all know me, I put it all together. And we pick and choose when to use this foundational black American, the cultural term, when we're dealing with legal documentation, freedmen, okay? Now, you keep saying that people say we're not culturally African. That's not saying we don't have African genetics or are not of African descent, but we're not culturally African. Furthermore, you talking about it excludes us from our reparations claim. No, it does not. Because we were enslaved on this land by the American government. Our claim is with this government, not with any African government, okay, or any other country's government. Those governments did not enslave our ancestors here, Mr. Holloman, okay? See, when you have a limited understanding of something and you start speaking, you make yourself sound very ignorant because you don't know any better. And like I just explained it to you, if you happen to come across this, you're still going to find a reason to argue. So I'm not even counting on enlightening you with anything I'm saying, regardless of what I'm going to show here tonight, because I'm not done educating at all. Okay? I'm not even counting on that. This is for the other people that might happen to find your channel, sizable channel, and go off that bad information. This is for the people that want the accurate information. I do hope at some point in your life, young man, that you do come into accurate understanding on your own, because there are certain phases that young people will go through where you can't tell them anything and they have to catch their snap, so to speak, later on, because life is a teacher. You will get the lesson the easy way or the hard way. We all have to choose. Okay. So I do hope he comes into that accurate understanding, but we're going to correct him on what he's saying here tonight. Let's let it continue.
I don't know how this we're not connected to Africa bullshit's going to turn out in the long run. I don't do that. And I have Native American ancestry. You can look at people in my family and tell that they have Native American ancestry, very strong features, and I don't run around here saying that stupid shit that I'm not black. FBA.
Where the hell did you hear a foundational black American say they not black at, Austin? Now, see, this lets me know that he kind of probably stumbled into that Dan Calloway crowd and he think that's all the same ideology. You know what I'm saying? No, we're talking about lineage, okay? How we gonna say we not black and the term foundational black American is what we call ourselves, huh? I don't know where this young man is getting this information. Let him continue.
Accuse African Americans with Caribbean or African roots of appropriating FBA struggle or music. I could agree with that. Can black people steal from other black people's culture? I noticed one thing. Even black women in the States have this issue. When white girls want to start braiding their hair, what's the problem with that? That's actually a compliment that people admire you so much that they're willing to copy you. Keep that in mind.
No, my ignorant young man, that is not a compliment. And I'm going to tell you why. And hopefully you'll do your research on this. OK, family, look at the Native Americans that were here in America. OK, you can also apply what I'm about to say to the original inhabitants of Australia, which were black people. And you can also apply this to the original inhabitants of Argentina, which were black people. It is not a compliment when them folks, the mayonnaise people, start appropriating your culture, because if you look at each of those three instances that I gave you, okay, with those different groups of people, once these people come amongst you and start assuming your identity, they start to eradicate you. What do we see running around here today calling themselves Native American? Elizabeth Warren. Pure lily white, don't have a drop of Native American ancestry in her. Dog the Bounty Hunter is another one. Most of these people claim to be Native Americans today are nothing but straight $5 Indian white folks. So no, Austin, it's not a trivial thing when people start appropriating your culture, but see, it would be to you because you would not understand how that correlates to the history I just broke down. Down in Australia, when that devil Christopher Columbus came down there and encountered those people, you saw what he did in the British. And now today, who calls themselves the Australians? You go to Australia, they got the original Aborigine people pushed off in the corners in little reservation-like places, and now a bunch of British descendants are calling themselves Australian. So no, Austin, it is not a small thing. It might be to you because you don't have an understanding of how those things work throughout history with black people and cultural appropriation. When white folks do that, that's a sign of them trying to eradicate or replace you per history, not per me. You can verify what I am saying. They've done this all over the world. There's many places that they are not the original inhabitants of. And if you look up and study who the original inhabitants of these places were, you will find that they were either darker skinned or black people, and they assumed their identities after they colonized and killed everybody. They completely wiped out the Tasmanian people, so they're not running around trying to pretend to be them, huh? But you see the point that I'm making. So now when sisters actually give voice about, these white women trying to culturally appropriate their hairstyles as far as braids or what have you, that's not coming from some trivial place, okay? It is not. Anytime you hear a foundational black American freedman take issue with cultural appropriation, it is not a trivial thing because, see, let me say this to you, young man, and everybody else. Just as if you wouldn't have a problem if Japanese people, Chinese people, Jamaican, any of the continental Africans over there, any of the 54 nations of Africa was to step up and say, hey, man, this is disrespecting our culture, this is cultural appropriation. If you're not going to wag your finger at them, don't you wag your finger at your own people, man. Our culture is to be preserved, gate-kept, and respected just like everybody else's. We have the right to say who is allowed in and who is not. Our culture is not for everybody. It is not for sale for other people. And see, as far as another thing, too, the issue that we have here and from our lineage in this country, when you have a Juneteenth scholarship, and then you see the first people in line is continental African immigrants and Caribbean immigrants trying to go and get that, that's not of their lineage. But then the minute that we start to try to adopt anything of theirs, remember Michael B. Jordan was trying to start that Juve liquor brand. Oh, wait a minute, boy, the Trinidadians, they got hot about that. And rightfully so. Hey, listen, it's their culture. Hey, you have the right to gatekeep your culture. We do too. We're not going to sit here and have our finger wagged at by some young man that's ignorant of his own lineage and history, telling us that you don't see a big deal. No, sir. No. You wag your finger at other groups of people and see what they tell you, but you got sense enough not to do that. Let it continue.
Now, one thing that is a problem with the FBA thing to me is it messes with Pan-Africanism. So I'm not a Pan-Africanist. Listen, I'm just Austin Hardeman. I'm not on none of that Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, none of that shit. Okay, I'm not on.
Wait a minute. See how confused this boy is, and I got to call him a boy up under me. I have to. Where the hell did you get that foundational Black Americans that our lineage blends into Pan-Africanism? Who the fuck told you that? I'm family. It's astonishing how ignorant he is. Where did you get that from? One of the things that we focus on here is taking care of our business at home. Now, to be clear, I've given y'all my stance on it. Pan-Africanism would be a beautiful idea. Here's the problem. You cannot have a one-sided Pan-African relationship. Everybody got to pull their own weight. And you can't force Pan-Africanism on anybody. For the people that are of our lineage here in America that are foundational Black Americans, y'all know right on this very channel, I recently showed you all and reviewed a live stream of Black Americans in Ghana, and they were talking about some of the cultural issues and things that, there was a respectful conversation. They was being honest about things. You see what I'm saying? So it's like a lot of Pan-Africanists here have never gone to the continent to know that over there they don't practice Pan-Africanism. Not amongst the different tribes, they don't. Not amongst the different nations, they don't. In fact, the business, the closest thing you can get to that would be Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, okay? Now that's the first signs of that. I hope that continues because I keep saying it. God bless that brother Ibrahim Traore. I hope that he is successful in all his endeavors. I would like to see him link up with Julius Malema if he can ever become president of South Africa. Oh boy, that would be a game changer for the continent. But prior to that, you've never seen Pan-Africanism on the continent of Africa. You haven't, okay? That is not something they're interested in. You can't make people be a part of something they're not. So this whole, I don't see how I would love to have asked the young man when he did this video, where did you get that idea that foundational Black Americans as a collective are Pan-Africanists? I don't understand where he got that. But he's going to tell us more, ladies and gentlemen. Let's let it continue.
None of that. I'm just me. Yeah, you ain't seen me doing no parades or none of that. I'm not doing no parades. But how does this disrupt global Black unity if we basically are creating FBA is basically like a tribalism thing, essentially. And
you know what? I can agree with that. And guess what? We're late to the tribalism party. For years, decades upon decades, Black Americans, be it Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, whoever you want to name, have been trying to extend olive branches. Hey, we all Black brothers and sisters. And in the beginning, the first wave of Black immigrants that came over here, your Stokely Carmichaels, Dr. Joseph Ben Yakinen, several others. Okay, you can even include Arthur Schomburg, etc. Those were the writers. Those times are long gone. We don't see that anymore. What followed after that generation of Black immigrants was a lot of the tether class. That's what they started importing over here then. That they don't want any type of unity. See, look, we got delineation from them. I'm not going to say every continental African because that would be a bold-faced lie, but in some parts, I got to keep it a buck. If you go around some, not all of them, they'll tell you if you go over there on that, hey, I'm coming back home and welcome back to the motherland, they will tell you, hey, you're not the real Africans. We are. Oh, yes, I've heard this many times. Some of y'all have heard this here. Well, and that's fine. You're right. We're not you. We're culturally different from you. African genetics, African descent. We acknowledge that. Are we culturally the same? Hell no. On a number of different things, we are vastly different in our thought process and a lot more, especially when it comes to confronting white supremacy. Okay? So that's just a stone cold fact right there. That is the truth. So a lot of what he's saying here, like, again, I would love to know where he got all this, because it's kind of like it's just jumbled all together, inaccurate. And somebody like this, if you try to explain to him that, no, what you saying, that's not right, they'll argue till they turn blue in the face. And it'll be the most hilarious thing ever. But see, where it becomes sad at is if you run around bound in your ignorance when people are trying to educate you better, so that you at least have a proper understanding of something, even if you disagree with it. See, let me tell you something. That's what I was taught. No matter what I disagree with, you at least need to have an accurate understanding of what you're disagreeing with. That way, if you choose to hold discourse in a debate or what have you, you can at least argue from a position of good faith. Now, if you don't know what you're talking about, you can't do that. Hence, you would lose any debate that you would go on to have with anybody about something you don't know anything about. Let it continue.
And I've also met some pro FBA people here in Kenya that do these fucking parades and all this other, and they got, all these Egyptian shit hanging off their face and all that, and feathers in their head. I've met some of these people in Kenya, and I'm wondering, if you are that invested in this, what the hell are you doing here?
Now, it's been several years since I've been to Kenya. I don't know what are you talking about. I'm gonna have to contact some of my Kenyan brothers and sisters that I'm cool with over there and be like, hey man, do we have foundational Black Americans running around in Egyptian stuff with feathers in their head? Like, because let me tell you what the problem is with what he just said. And I gotta be honest. When you are as uneducated on certain things that he's spoken on here, I can't take what he's saying he saw at face value either. I'm like, look, the greater majority of our people are right here. Should we travel and go abroad, but we come right back home after we've seen what we need to see, stay a week or two, what have you. The greater majority of our people are not moving abroad. Do you have Black Americans that have expatriated to certain countries on the continent? Yes, Ghana will be one. There's some in Kenya. But as far as what are you talking about with parades and stuff, I'm going to have to do my homework on that. That's beyond me. That's not something I've heard anybody over here that I know of that goes back and forth to the continent talk about. So, maybe it's something that he thinks he saw and he didn't see it. I don't know. I'm going to do my research on it, though. Austin, I appreciate you telling us about this, but that is not something that most of us would do. But I will agree with this statement. If that is what he saw and that is what's going on, I agree with this assessment. If they're so gung-ho and pro our people, then they're supposed to do that over here. Because, see, that's one of the things we have a problem with over here, too. Especially for the disrespectful immigrants of any background, not just the Black immigrants. If you coming over here swinging your country's home flag or what have you, and you that proud of it, why you ain't there? You know what I'm saying? All that flag swinging, foreign flag swinging, then you need to be over there in that country, but they won't ever go back there. Ain't that something? How you going? Look, to me, the people that do that, I don't care what race of immigrant it is. If you come to somebody else's country and you swinging your homeland flag, and you never don't want to go back there, if the thought of going back there is a punishment, you have a schizophrenic relationship with your identity. There's no place in the world that I have ever been as a foundational Black American freedom man over the years that I've been traveling on this planet. And I've ever, had a schizophrenic relationship with my homeland. And to the point you don't never want to go back? Like, how you going to say you love someplace, but you never want to set foot there? Kodak Black, anybody? Man, I ain't never going down there with his much mouth ass. Huh? Kodak said he ain't never going down there to Haiti where he from. Huh? Where his people from, So, anyway, I'm going to do my homework on what the young man is talking about, see what I can find out. And I'll let y'all know what I find out, if I find out. So let it continue.
And as I said, FBA is just basically a tribe of Black, essentially. And I don't even know if I should say tribe, because I've had some somewhat mentality, I don't know, Pan-African people try to tell me the word tribe is a colonial term, and the proper term for tribe was group of people. I thought those meant the same thing, but apparently I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm too young to know history, as y'all have said, because you definitely cannot know about World War I unless if you were there, or you can't know about slavery unless if you were there. You got to be a certain age to know about that kind of stuff. You can't read a book or go to a history class and learn. You got to be a certain age to know that. Y'all are dumb. Yeah, some of these comments y'all leave are dumb.
Wait a minute, Austin. Didn't you tell me that, the scholarship in books is not of value? Now, y'all saw why I presented those screenshots of that chat earlier, right? Because I was waiting for him to get to this part. Oh, now he's trying to be sarcastic about it. No, you told me, young man, that, or you tried to imply that, okay, anything that's written in a book, or I would just believe it if you said that your shit was chalk white and all this other goofy stuff that you was talking about. Oh, but now books and documentation has value. Which is it, young man? Pick a side. Either scholarship and documentation has value or it does not. Yes, you can learn about slavery or World War I without being there. We have documentation on these things, okay? Which is what I was trying to present to you when I gave you some of the names of some of the most thorough scholars that it was clear that you never heard of them, because if you had, you would have said, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to check that out. Look, I'm going to tell you one of the funny things about that discourse from those screenshots that I showed you, because I ain't have time to show y'all all of that. There were people in his chat room trying to tell him, you know what I'm saying, about what I'm talking about here tonight. I was like, hey, whoa, I can't remember all of them, but I saw them. It was over there like, hey, man, whoa, you got that kind of off. You know what I'm saying? But, when you prideful and can't nobody tell you nothing. And then again, hey, maybe it's just content engagement. Nonetheless, we're going to get it straight over here tonight. Let's let it continue.
Basically, I think this is more of a cult of, if people try to say it's not an organization, but based off of what I've seen, and I'm giving it a fair chance by doing my research and looking up the definitions, and I can say I would be FBA, but based off the way how the nationalistic, Nazi-like behavior that it has against other groups of black people in this.
See, now this is too where ignorance is dangerous when you're young. Austin, and I would like to assume you know this, because I'm going to talk to you like you talk to other people. Words have actual meanings. Now, where can you even inclinate if you even know what a Nazi is? I heard you mention Hitler, but apparently you don't know what Nazis are. How the hell you going to compare foundational Black American freedmen, our lineage, to being Nazi-like in any way? We not lynching people. We not committing Holocaust on folks. We've never gone to other people's countries and colonized them or taken from them or murdered their people. We don't do that. Our lineage here, foundational Black American freedmen, we're not talking about the Moors. We're talking about the people here in America that are descendants of slaves, of chattel slavery. For you to equate our lineage to Nazism, young man, you don't know what the Nazis are. You clearly can't. You can't know what they are. Because look, again, words have meanings. And if you're going to make that kind of statement, you should be able to show where, as a collective, we running around talking about killing people and lynching them just because they're not of our lineage. Show me where we've done that as a collective, Austin. Words actually matter. But again, like I said, you see the state of ignorance this young man is stuck in. Let's let him continue.
I'm not with the whole black hierarchy thing, okay? We're all descendants of slaves at some point. Some people even try to tell me that my analysis of slavery is incorrect. A slave is a fucking slave.
It is incorrect, and no, a slave is not a fucking slave. No, it's not. I hate to tell you that, young man. We're going to get to proving more of what I said here earlier tonight. See, I'm showing y'all this before we get further into this exegesis here tonight, because I need you to see where his head is locked in at. Because, see, if I would have just presented you the information, you'd have been like, oh, man, it can't be that bad. No, over here on this channel, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. That's one of the things that separates me from a lot of people's content. I don't mind taking the time to show you what I'm talking about before I pick it completely apart. Let's let it continue.
I don't give a damn if they treated you better than the other slaves. You're still a slave. I mean, did you put in a resume and a job application to get your job, or were you held against your will and transported to another part of the world to do work? That's what a fucking slave is. A human trafficker does not usually have people in chattels. Like if they're like a sex slave or something, and somewhere in Texas, They don't have to be on a plantation getting whipped. A slave is a slave. Anyway, FBAs were descendants of slaves. Some may say otherwise. I'm going to open up this discussion and we'll do some responses, and we're going to shut this down for once and for all. And honestly, I think that this isolating the black Americans from everybody else is actually disadvantaging the entire black race, because we should actually work together, because with your new administration, a lot of stuff is finna get bad for the immigrants and for the native black Americans.
Oh, you are right, Mr. Holloman. We are about to shut some things down now because, ladies and gentlemen, we have heard Mr. Holloman's fair say here. Yeah, I didn't edit anything that he said other than the first video where I cut to the chase of my points of contention. I wasn't going to play that entire thing. It's up on his channel for those of you that would choose to go and review that. You can. Now what we finna do is like Ric Flair used to say, now we go to school, because now we finna get some things straight. So the last statement that he made, talking about, you know, what he believes, because it's his right to believe whatever he wants, that he thinks that, you know, the delineation movement amongst foundational black American freedmen is hurting the entire black race. No, the orange man is hurting his own people here more than he is black folks. Let's be clear about that. Trump is tearing their system up nationwide. Oh, our people are going to be just fine. We're going to be just fine. Furthermore, you're talking about, you know, basically trying to come at it from the black unity standpoint. You can't unify with people that don't want to unify with you. Now, I'm not saying that all continental Africans or Caribbean people have a mindset where they don't want to unify with other black folks. Not going to say that. But I would be lying. And many of them would be if they said that that's exactly what their people are trying to do, is go around the world and unify with other black people, especially when they can't even get along at home, especially on the continent of Africa. All them different tribes fighting for hundreds of years. Look where it's gotten you. Nowhere. So, no, we let them do them, wish them well, and we do us. Now, you can unite with individuals. You can do that no matter what race they're from or what country they're from. You got some good people of individuals that you can unite with, and I encourage that. But for the most part, you can't drag somebody kicking and screaming where they don't want to be, okay? So now we about to go to school, though, on a great deal that he was talking about. We finna get back on this Irish slave thing and break a lot more down regarding history here. Let's let it continue.
Good afternoon. We have the pleasure of being with Dr. John Henry Clark, one of.
And for those that are younger, let me go ahead and make this introduction. I would be remiss if I didn't. For those of you who are younger, brothers and sisters over here on this channel, we're going to get into the work of Dr. John Henry Clark briefly. I'm going to let our Grandmaster teacher talk uninterrupted. And I want you to hear what he has to say about the continent of Africa, okay? Because Mr. Holloman, the things that you were reading from, whatever those sources were, now you're going to hear from somebody that actually knows what the hell he was talking about, went to the continent many, many times, actually wrote book upon book upon book and paper upon paper about the subject that you were surmising that you have accurate on, okay? I'm going to let Dr. Clark speak here.
The world's most preeminent historians on Africa and African American history. Dr. Clark, today we want to deal with the history of the slave trade. First of all, could you give us an overview of Africa's place in world history before European contact?
Now, before European contact, and when we're dealing with the slave trade, we should really deal with the slave trade, or at least refer to it as an international institution that touched the life of every people on the face of the earth. When we're dealing with the African slave trade, we have to deal with the different periods. We have to deal with the period of the Arab slave trade that started 600 years before the European slave trade. Then we must deal with how and why the African slave trade started. Now, for most of the existence of Africa, most of the time African people have been on the earth, they've been free, independent people, free of foreign domination, free of slavery. The Arab slave trade was the first massive slave trade in Africa. And you have to make a clear distinction between slavery and servitude. Concurrent with European feudalism, systems of servitude existed all over the world. China, India, and some of these systems still existed. But these systems of servitude had nothing to do with and did not resemble chattel slavery. Up until the Roman period, when the Romans, with the pressure of Islam, were driven out of Africa, most African states were independent states. We're not talking about nation states similar to the artificial borders that's in most African states of the day, or the nation states of Europe, or the nation states in the United States. We're talking about states with loose borders. We're talking about states with cultural borders as against geographical borders. Africa had a pretty reasonable time of it, in as much as you had a society that dictated the land could not be bought or sold. It was the collective property of a whole people as against that of a given landlord. Therefore, feudalism could not develop. Now, while there was domination, there was no land grabbing and land ownership to the point where no man could find enough land to feed his family. With the coming of the Arab domination of the land, and with the coming of people who began to claim title to the land, and with the offsprings of the Arabs claiming title to their father's land, both in West and inner West Africa and large parts of East Africa, you begin to find a form of landlordism that began to resemble European feudalism. Now, once this was challenged by the coming of the European did not come to Africa looking for land at first. He came looking for trade at first. Legitimate trade to the point where the slave trade really wasn't necessary. The Europeans were using and enslaving other Europeans, and had that system of slavery worked out, the enslavement of the African would not have been massive.
Dr. Clark, let me ask you, I wanted to clarify Africans' role in world events at that time.
No, Africans had played a major role. See, it is hard for a lot of people to imagine, but Africa, up until the Greek and Roman invasion, Africa was the center of the world.
That's what I want to
look at. It was the commercial center of the world. It was the intellectual center of the world. It was the culture center of the world. It was the supply. It was the world's last great geographical reserve.
In comparison, what was Europe like? And when we're talking about Europe, and I'm separating Europe right now from Greece and Rome.
We need to separate Europe from Greece and Rome, because Greece and Rome was not a European creation, but a Mediterranean creation. It got its stimulation from North Africa and Western Asia. There was no Europe as such for many years. The Germans had united. England had barely united. When they finally united, they united over after a series of wars. The 100-Year War, the War of the Roses, and they fought over nothing.
What was Europe doing at this particular?
Now, I let Dr. Clark speak there without interruption at all, because when the Grandmaster Teacher, even though he is transcended, our mortal plane here, is talking, I let that man talk, okay? That is one of the Grandmaster Teachers that many of us have gained inspiration from as far as learning who we are as a people globally, all right? And you heard one of the things that Dr. Clark say. He made it clear that chattel slavery, not the same as what everybody else went through, like Mr. Holloman seemed to think here, okay? He also provided a basis for what was going on at the time, the chronological order of things, and much more, okay? So that's why I wanted to let that play without interruption for any young person that comes back and plays this broadcast. But we are not done. Oh, no, we are not finished going to school yet, because y'all know me. I'm thorough with it when I get to breaking something down and debunking nonsense, okay? Now we finna get into this, talk about this Irish slave. Oh, well, we ain't done with that. Oh, we finna go back here, because we gonna make sure that at least this channel has a functioning record on making that clear. Now, I've done this in the past over the years, but not the way I'm gonna do it here tonight. And I'm gonna do this a bit different way. I'm going to have other younger people talking about this, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and get into that right now, and I'll be stopping it where need be to correct anything that needs to be corrected. Let's get into it.
If people only misbehave towards each other based on skin color, I would have had a very smooth entry to the...
And yes, I'm gonna play this knucklehead here again if you hadn't caught my previous broadcast. And shout out to Professor Black Truth. I got this clip from him, and I remember seeing this African professor somewhere before that. I can't remember what his name was, but I want to play this because, see, this guy right here and Austin have a lot in common, okay? Because we're going to get to that Irish slave trade thing right after Peanut Head here starts speaking. But they have a lot in common as far as, like, their willful ignorance of things, okay? So, again, I want to play for you what little Peanut Head here is about to say, this little Tilda African professor, about the slave trade here, because he has it backwards as well, all right? And you're going to see somebody try to educate him. See, I'm showing you, especially if you're a young person, what it means when you try to educate somebody with something that's actual fact and they still argue. You don't waste your time with that, okay? You don't waste your time with that. Your time and the breath that you draw is very precious. You could be using that to do other things. So I'm showing you what that looks like when you're talking to somebody like that. So let it continue.
United States in Bridgeport. When I arrived here, because of my background, the work I did before I came to college, my academic advisor insisted that I should go to the high school, public high schools in Bridgeport to speak and just share with the kids what I have traveled the world as a reporter. And I will tell you, even as a grown man till now, when I think about my experience in those classrooms, I shed tears. Black kids, no white person among them. They call me all kinds of names. They make fun of my accent. They ask me if I've ever slept with a lion. They ask me if I'm a booty scratcher. All kinds of things.
When you use the statement, slavery was never based on racism,
yes.
You are referencing countries all over the world.
Yeah, countries or,
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, let's come to America.
Mm-hmm.
And speak in reference to the enslavement of African people in America.
Mm-hmm.
Would you still hold that view? Are you still saying that in America, slavery was never based on racism?
Yes. The same thing that spurred it in Africa, the same thing that caused it in Asia, the same thing that caused it in Europe is the same thing that caused it in America. That's all.
What caused it?
Economic needs. The weaker person, you can catch him. The Barbary gang, they were able to catch the Northern Europeans of the Slavics and all these people because they were nearer to them, they can catch them. So whoever is weak for you to keep and use for your economic needs, slavery was purely based on economic needs.
Okay, so in America, Are you saying that it was economic needs to choose and exclusively enslave black people?
Not exclusively enslave black people.
Again, we talk about the context of the enslavement.
It's not exclusively they chose black people. White people in Europe bought white people.
But we're talking about America.
Yes, Americans got black people to do the economic needs they want here.
Okay. And black people were the only people who were enslaved the way they were here in America, right?
Yeah.
So then the enslavement of a people here in America was based on race.
No. Why would it be based on race?
Why would it not be?
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what an idiot looks like. A willful idiot, okay? We need to learn how to recognize those amongst us that fit that description and leave them where they are, because, you know, that's what you would call a lost cause. And one of the intelligent things people must learn to do in this day and age is recognize the lost cause and leave it where it is, okay? Life will deal with the lost causes. It is not your job to do so. If in good faith and good conscience you've tried to present honest, accurate information to someone and they continue to ignore it, okay? However, when it comes to the class here, if you do that, you will be checked for that. Those of our lineage, we give leeway to the young, but you're not going to be allowed to misrepresent us either. Now, you can choose to learn or not, but if you come over here and you join the Turning Point USAs, okay, if you get with the PragerUs and all of that, and you let them use you as a tool to come out here and spew anti-black racist talking points and be their black mouthpiece because they don't want to say it as white folks, you're going to meet staunch opposition as well from people that are well qualified to educate you with nothing but truth. So now let's get back to the Irish slave trade thing here and start debunking that, because like I said, you got work to do. Let's get back to it.
Hey, Cypher here. There are a lot of misconceptions surrounding the institution of slavery, especially here in the United States. These myths often serve pernicious political purposes that can be highly detrimental to a proper conception of history. So here are 10 of those myths, debunked in no particular order. Since they aren't in a particular order, each one is fairly different from the other. So you should stick around, because the list goes all over the place. Just as an aside, I'm going to be focusing mostly on the US, because this is where the myths serve their most malignant political purpose. If you are someone who is offended by these facts, check my sources. As per usual, they are in the description. It is a common meme going around the internet. Anytime a Black Lives Matter issue comes up, I'll see people putting these up on Facebook. Well, these are all wrong. White slaves did exist, but not in the American colonies. Mostly on the Barbary Coast, where Muslim corsairs would capture and enslave whites. In the New World, the closest whites got to being enslaved was indentured servitude. Indentured servitude is a system in which one is forced to labor for a limited period of time. Sometimes there were cruel bosses, but there were many more laws protecting against cruel masters of indentured servants than slaves. And there was, in fact, a legal difference. Also, sometimes people were sentenced to indentured servitude for crimes they had committed. Their contracts could even be sold by owners. But generally, these contracts...
Now, we're going to pause it right here because, you know, according to Mr. Holloman, he seems to think that a slave is a slave. Okay? No, Mr. Holloman. American chattel slavery didn't have any contracts. Our ancestors didn't sign contracts to get freedom dues after a period of 7 years for being on them plantations, okay? At all. So no, a slave is not a slave. Big difference between that and an indentured servant like you're hearing here. And see, young people that are over here on this platform, if you just now found this platform, feel free to go back through the archives because I've taught on this for many years, but we're going to do it in a comprehensive format here tonight, okay? Because I recognize as times change, you need to update how you present your information to younger generations, all right? Those of you that are older, you already know this stuff, but this will be something that you can use to help younger people in your families as well, okay? So I'm going to let this continue because this video right here is going to go through a lot of the common misconceptions or outright lies that the white supremacists tell about slavery in America because they know the truth. They'll do anything to keep from having to pay them reparations, but it's going to come a time where they're going to be begging to pay them. Mark my words, many like myself are confident in that because all you got to do is look at all the stuff they're going through. See, let me say this about the white supremacists. They are a hard-headed people. They are similar to Pharaoh in the Bible, but you saw how that worked out for him, and they get you their wake-up call. Look at all the things that's happened to them since that pandemic happened, huh? When you hear them running around talking about we're back, America's back, and all of that, oh, they are in for a rude awakening. They are never going to get back to the position that they were in before that pandemic. They're holding on to hope through that, though, because they're looking to Trump to save them. But I got bad news for you. Trump ain't going to save you. And one reason why, look at what you keep doing, white supremacist America. You keep doing egregious harm to black people and justifying your wrongdoing. We're seeing that right now with the Carmelo Anthony situation. We're seeing that now, how they're reacting to what our good brother Mr. Hinton did, you know, to avenge the loss of his son. And I salute that brother for that. Like I said, somebody take your child out of here. That's a declaration of war. Many things that we've seen. They tried to justify the murder of our good sister Sonia Massey. You saw that horrific incident and how that went down. This woman was in her home and that racist, anti-black pig of a race soldier shot this woman in the face because he didn't understand something she was saying. I could go on and on. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Tamir Rice, etc. Trust me, they're getting their wake-up call now. Their judgment. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Even if the greater majority of black people in this country did have some type of sympathy for them, we can't save them from the judgment that's coming upon their heads. You don't have to be a religious person. You don't have to believe that. All you got to do, though, look at what's happening to these people. Look how they crying about losing their federal jobs and everything else. They crying. Black people out here learning line dances, man, and pretty much just living our lives. We know how to deal with hardship. We're God's children. They're the ones that are in trouble. So that's my message to white supremacist America. But we're going to continue debunking these myths and these lies about these Irish slaves here. Let's get back to it.
This would only be for 5 to 20 years. Slavery, indentured servitude, was not. Some might call indentured servants sentenced to life slavery, but that would be like calling a modern prisoner sentenced to life a slave. That's just weird. This myth tends to focus on the Irish, who did in fact suffer tremendously under English rule. Some could be said to have been put into serfdom, but that was in the old world. In the new one, the closest they came to slavery was indentured servitude, and it was generally voluntary, not coerced. Nor were they treated more brutally than black slaves. The invention of slavery predates history itself. While it is generally incorrect to say that ancient Persian and Egyptian states practiced slavery, we know from their records that slavery existed in surrounding states. Furthermore, there is archaeological evidence that shows it was a common practice throughout the world, and nearly every place in the world had slavery at some point in its history or prehistory. Chattel slavery, as in the practice of hereditary race-based enslavement, was something that was practiced throughout the Middle East and Asian steppe for centuries prior to 1490. Each of Islamic states practiced it until the fall of the Ottoman Empire in 1918, and some well after that. The last African country to abolish slavery was Mauritania, and it happened in 1981, and it is still a problem for many countries. Several countries, especially Mauritania, still have prominent illegal and de facto slavery. Since the government is unwilling to enforce its mandates against slavery, many people still hold slaves today. European empires, such as the Greeks and Romans, had practiced slavery and were crucial to their economies. The only real reason why they stopped was that the system of serfdom implemented after the Roman Empire made slavery kind of unnecessary for a while. No black man was the first slave owner in America, as internet memes are apt to say. The person they're referring to was an Angolan indentured servant named Anthony Johnson, who in turn came to own indentured servant contracts after he earned his freedom. He even had the first written record of refusing to accept the end of an indentured contract, thereby making the man named John Kacer a legal slave. But there had been slaves in that colony since before the Kacer lawsuit in 1655. African slaves were sold in 1634 there, and I'm not referring to indentured servants either. I mean straight up slaves. This is normally meant to show that slavery in the New World was colorblind, but that doesn't show it in the slightest. It had been racially based since the second voyage of Columbus. Spanish colonies had been practicing chattel slavery for over a century, including in Florida. It took a while for the racism to build up in the English colonies, but it did so, regardless of who owned the slaves. The Civil War was not initially fought to end slavery. Abraham Lincoln was very clear in 1862 by stating, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that." The Emancipation Proclamation was not an easy decision on his part, for there were slave states fighting for the Union. But it was prompted by people like John C. Fremont declaring slaves emancipated under their own authority as military governors. It also gave a crucial purpose to the Union's fight, as people were becoming more and more disillusioned of the Civil War. Instead, the North fought to keep the Union intact. Ending secession was their chief motivation. Of course, the reason for secession in the first place is a bit different.
Now, you've heard what we're going through so far over here, right? And I'm letting this play so that people can kind of get a gist of what's being said. And hopefully you will go and do more of your own research to verify what I'm showing you over here tonight, okay? So now you see, we just chopped through most of the BS that Mr. Holloman was talking about, all right? I'll let you hear from Dr. Clark on how the origins of things went and what was going on during that time. Now we're dealing with some of the more modern white supremacist myths, and we're debunking that as well here. Okay, so now let's talk about Anthony Johnson for a second before we continue. That meme has been going around in white supremacist spaces for years. Okay, they claim, oh, a black man was the first person to own some slaves in America. I'm like, okay, now, boy, that they're really testing people thinking they're stupid if you believe that. First of all, no black man was going to be in competition with white slave owners at that time, all right? Anthony Johnson was a free man, like you said. Like they said here, he came into possession of an indentured servant contract, but he wasn't competing with no big-ass plantation against white folks in the American South at that time. Do you really see? Think about that. Sometimes, even if you don't know history, all you have to do is use common sense. Does anybody in my chat room listen to this live recorded? You can let me know in the comments after this is over. Does it make sense to you to think that any black person would be allowed to compete, an economic competitor with white folks owning plantations back at that time openly? You see how silly that sounds when you say that? You see what I'm saying? And see, in the other cases, because I already know the white supremacists would go, they were saying, well, there was some black people that did own slaves. Okay, now the black folks that are of our lineage that got their freedom, they would later go and buy their family members back. And they had documents saying that they owned them or what have you. That's what that was all about. It wasn't them starting no plantation to compete with white slave masters. That just wasn't going to happen. Huh? So, again, I'm just showing you some simple things that you can use, even if you're not well-read or well-studied on the scholarship of accurate history. So we're going to try to help you out with that here tonight. Especially if you're a young person, we're going to give you a guidepost to go by. And we're going to just outright debunk a lot of crap that the white supremacists are running around saying. Let's let it continue.
Oh boy, is this a thorny issue. I've done an entire episode on the causes of the Civil War, but it is absolutely undeniable that slavery was a chief motivation for secession. In every document proclaiming secession, slavery is explicitly mentioned. This is part of lost cause revisionism. They try to say that slavery was a minor factor, and that the North had been trampling over the rights of the South as independent states. They bring up the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which states that any power expressed by the Constitution would instead be given to the states, rather than the federal government. They call out that there was a tremendous difference in culture and that tariffs were choking farmers. These were all factors for sure, but not the most important one. Lincoln being elected was, and the South's fear of his position on slavery made them secede. Everything else is peripheral to this one problem. If you want more on that, go watch the episode that I mentioned before. In 1860, the time of the last census before the Civil War, roughly 36% of freemen in the South owned slaves. That would seem insignificant since they were in the minority overall. But as one article pointed out, that is roughly the same percentage of Americans with college degrees right now. It is not an insignificant number. Furthermore, the Southern social system was entirely dependent on their peculiar institution. So even if they were not slave owners, most were heavily entrenched in a way of life that was absolutely dependent on slavery.
Now, that's very important that he mentioned that, because, you know, a lot of the white supremacists will tell, well, my family never owned a slave. But your family benefited from American chattel slavery back then and today. For example, any company in this country, any corporation that's over 100 years old, it was founded off of slave money, okay? Hell, our people, our ancestors, foundational Black American freedmen, were the first stocks and bonds in this country, okay? Don't let these people gaslight you. Even if their ancestors weren't direct plantation owners, they benefited off of it, because think about it. One of the things that's not often talked about, if you had slaves as a plantation owner back then, you had to have those slaves insured, okay? Who you think was making money off of the insurance? It wasn't Black people. You see what I'm saying? See, boy, there's so much. This is why I often, and not just myself, but many others tell you that it's important to have a strong command of history, so that when these white supremacists start telling you these lies, you know the truth. And it's furthermore important for the younger people of our lineage to know, okay, what the truth is, so that they're not buying their version of fabricated history. Because, see, this will lead to low self-esteem issues. And, you know, to hear them tell it, they the greatest thing since sliced bread, or they invented everything, when most of the things that we have in this country that make it great for what it is was invented by our ancestors. Now, I will tell you one thing that the white supremacists don't want to take credit for, that they're the best at, in my opinion. They're the best at stealing intellectual property, actual physical property. They don't want to take credit for that. Oh, no, they might be the greatest thieves on the planet, amongst other things, if we're going to go there. But, hey, you know, they don't want to take credit for that. Let it continue, family.
I've heard this from actual graduate students. Hell, Karl Marx made a similar argument in Das Kapital. It's that tired Marxist terminology of wage slavery.
We haven't been paid in 2 weeks and we want our way.
Now, this is an important part of this, because this is where people try to play semantics and try to conflate chattel slavery with different types of slavery, basically figurative slavery. That's one of the most insulting things you can let anybody do to our ancestors and our lineage. I want y'all to pay attention to this, because this is a tactic that the white supremacists try to use also. Check this out.
Wages.
Wages? You want to be wage slaves? Answer me that. No, of course not. Well, what makes wage slaves? Wages. I want you to be free.
But this is a false equivocation. As I pointed out in class back then, when one possesses different legal rights, it is impossible to say those same people are equal. Slaves had far less legal rights than white factory workers. In some states, they had no rights whatsoever. If workers, they could be sued or even jailed for assault. As a side myth busting, Americans were far more likely to sue each other prior to World War I than ever since. Lawsuits were...
Now, let me pause it right there, and let's expound upon something that he just said. about slaves having less rights. First of all, they had no rights. Our ancestors had no rights in no states. There's no such thing as any slave having rights on a plantation. Fact of the business now, when he tried to compare like them to factory workers, that's so insulting to our people. The thing is, if a factory worker, you know, back then got beaten by their boss, yes, they could go to court about that. They had the Casual Killing Act back during the plantation era days, where if the plantation master accidentally killed a slave, hey, it didn't count as a human life. You could get away with that. Now, that would be financially stupid on their part, but it did happen because their slaves were insured. But there were instances where they did beat our ancestors to death. And there was no trial, no prosecution or nothing because they viewed us as property, okay? So now, the Irish never went through anything of the sort here as an indentured service. No, they did not. They didn't come close to a fraction of the hell that our ancestors suffered. Let it continue.
Extraordinarily common in comparison to today. And that myth needs to go away because it is perpetrated by big businesses and benefits them only. Anyways, there were many business practices, such as chaining workers to their factory position, that were decidedly cruel, but that is nothing compared to what many slaves experienced. Now, it is also a myth that all slave owners were cruel and abusive. For many, slavery was not as unpleasant as movies like to make it out to be. After all,
now, this is the part here where I'm going to have to correct this narrator here. Oh, no. Look, let's get one thing straight, because you heard this in the previous broadcast that I did when it got to the part where old Pasty Pearly was talking about slavery was embellished. There is no such thing as pleasant slavery, okay? There wouldn't, look, just because you had some people, and this is true now, during the time of emancipation and everything, there were some people, and we can tell that who their descendants are today, that wanted to stay on the plantation because they didn't know nothing else, okay? Just because a person is ignorant of how they're being treated doesn't mean that it was pleasant or it wasn't as bad. See, this is what the white supremacists will do. So even here in this narration here, I had to correct that. There's no such thing. Look, some of these people, and you all can verify this because this has been going on for years, when they write about it or they make movies about it, they try to romanticize Sally Heming, the slave, and Thomas Jefferson, as if that was a romanticized free will relationship. No, he was a rapist. That's what that was. Funny how his descendants today, they don't want to make no mention about who, you know what I'm saying, their descendant, their Sally Hemings, you know, who they're descended from. They don't want to talk about that. But that's actual history. So don't ever let these people try to tell you that, well, it's not as bad as some movies made out. Now, we ain't talking about the movies. We looking at the documentation of what these devils did to our ancestors, man. We can't even look. Like I said, you saw at the beginning of the broadcast, I tried to recommend a young man to read Austin to read The Delectable Negro so he could hear about some of the things that they did to our ancestors, man. We couldn't even sit. Look, if I tried to run down that entire list tonight, man, we would be here forever, man. We'll be here forever. Now, I've got that history documented in the archives of this channel and on my Patreon. Okay, y'all seen that over the years, but no, I had to go ahead and shut that down. There was no such thing as, oh, well, it wasn't that bad. You think about it. Getting beat, having to work in them plantations, man, not just picking the cotton or tobacco, but in any cotton field or tobacco field, they had poisonous snakes. They put our children out there. And that's just on the labor end of it. Never mind all the sexual rape and the buck breaking and everything that was going on, beating people in front of their families, the men and the women, or the children, huh? And this fool gonna tell me, talking about it was such thing as pleasant slavery? Nah, man. Nope. That's a lie from the pit of the hill. Let's let it continue.
Had to keep slaves controlled, and love is often a far more potent force of coercion than fear. The various acts of rebellion that were prevalent throughout the history of slavery had to be curtailed somehow, and many masters were kind to their slaves. But the peculiar institution had a corrosive effect on anyone involved. It is true that there were slaves who were forced to work for the Confederacy. There is no record of slaves voluntarily working for the Confederacy save for one particular instance. Towards the end of the Civil War, the Confederate Congress passed a bill that allowed for a slave regiment to be created. It was supposedly voluntary, but then again, so was their Conscription Act. And conscription, by no stretch of the definition, can be defined as voluntary. In either case, the regiment that was created never saw action, and was a divisive issue for the Confederates in general.
Now that's important that he spoke on that, because here the white supremacists tell it, if you let them tell you, well, there was black people that fought for the Confederacy. Now you heard what was, and that can be proven too. that didn't happen the way they said, okay? The unit was formed, but they didn't go into war like that. No, they didn't. Now, what they were going to do was promise them their freedom or what have you, but like I said, that didn't get a chance to take place. Hear them tell it? Well, you know, some of your own people were fighting to stay enslaved. That's what they try to spin that, right? I told you, we gonna get it straight over here tonight. Let's let it continue.
The Colombian slave trade was created by Europeans, and the place that they received slaves was in West Africa. But unlike what is commonly conceived, they did not just go raiding inland with nets to grab up unsuspecting tribesmen. The African slave trade was predicated on Africans selling other Africans. It was a
That part is true. We've gone over that many times over here, and we're going to further underscore it tonight. They did cooperate. Because, like, a lot of times, look, and we just got to be blunt and honest about this. I did this on the last broadcast where I was covering the subject matter of Ghana, the black American expats over in Ghana. A lot of kind of Africans try to shy away from that part of history and say, well, they stole. No, nobody stole nobody. We're not going to tell that lie. We were not stolen. We were sold. That is the truth. That is truth. That is documented truth. It can be proven, okay? Not just West Africa either. Look up who Tipu Tib was. That was an East African slave trader. He was half Arab and half African, okay? His father was Arab and his mother's people was African, okay? He hated black African people. He was one of the biggest East African slave traders ever. He participated as well, okay? So a lot of times they just try to dump things on West Africa. I'm like, no. Now we gonna tell the history and the truth of it. We gonna tell the whole truth. Let it continue.
System already in place before Columbus arrived to take the first slaves to the New World in 1498. Like most slave institutions, it was created by capturing prisoners during warfare. Europeans had no need to kidnap Africans, like they show in movies all the time. Africans were already doing that for them. They developed an entire economy around that trade. This devastated Western Africa, which has yet to recover from the economic circumstances imposed by the transatlantic slave trade. That doesn't vindicate Europeans for their slave trading, of course. Two wrongs don't make a right, let alone how Europeans would encourage the trade through their economic incentives and political maneuvering in Africa. It was a lucrative business after all. It just means that Africans were active participants in the trade and not only victims of it. First of all, slavery is still an ongoing issue. Many countries throughout the world have clear slavery, and not just coerced labor like Chinese factory workers. I mean, chattel slavery still exists.
We weren't allowed to be reporting on slavery. It's a practice the government tries to hide from outsiders. But as we would find, slavery is everywhere in Mauritania, if you know where to look.
It is illegal worldwide, but practiced anyways in a number of countries, so slavery has not ended. Furthermore, abolishment of slavery was not an invention of white people. The Qin dynasty were the first recorded abolitionists. They are the reason why we call that country China.
China now.
And the first Chinese emperor was an abolitionist. Slavery fluctuated throughout world history. The idea that slavery is inherently wrong does not originate in Europe, nor is it particularly unique there. Abolition was also motivated by slave revolts. Slaves were not just docile servants, but often actively opposed their own enslavement. Slave revolts happened throughout the modern period, one of which culminated in the liberation of Haiti, long before most European countries abolished slavery. Even when they were forced into the most wretched conditions possible aboard ship on the Middle Passage, there were around 250 shipboard slave revolts. It was such a problem that slave ships often had barricades to defend themselves against such revolts. There's also a kind of disgusting side to claiming that whites freed the slaves. For how wonderful it is that the captors freed the captives. How nice of them to just decide on their own volition to stop oppressing people. This is a particularly pernicious myth, because it makes slaves objects rather than actors in their own right, as well as completely forgetting the Western powers were particularly egregious when it came to the abolition of slavery. All of these myths need to be stopped.
All right, so now we just broke down and went through 10 of the myths that the white supremacists love to tell about American chattel slavery, and you learned a bit more about slavery on a geopolitical level, okay? And it does still go on in certain countries today. There's no dispute about that. Is it comparative to what our ancestors went through? Hell no. No, that is 250 plus years, slavery, uncompensated labor, lost lives, lost land, lost property, etc. Okay? Not the same thing. Moreover, our justice claim is here with this government that enslaved us here on American soil in our nation that we built. Okay, just to reiterate and underscore that. All right? So now, not done yet. Got one more piece of history we got to go ahead and share with you all because I want to be thorough on the subject matter here tonight. And I have been thus far, but like I said, doing this long form so that there will be no doubt about the foolishness that Mr. Holloman was purveying there. And again, like I said, perhaps he will go on to continue learning at his own pace or what have you, or maybe someone will reach him. But we're going to make sure that people have the truth about that Irish slave crap and everything else here. So we're going to get into one more segment here that we got to analyze, and I want y'all to check this out.
All right, kids, Juneteenth is coming up. If you don't know what it is or remember what I told you about it, check out the What to a Black Person is Your Independence Day video I made about it last year. This month, black people all around the country will be celebrating Juneteenth. I'm sure some will do so instead of Independence Day, inviting people to the cookout while learning more about Juneteenth themselves and educating others along the way. Although Juneteenth is not a federal holiday yet, it is recognized in most states in America. With this uptick in recognition for blackness, even though Juneteenth should be celebrated.
Of course, we know they made it a federal holiday now, okay, so that lets you know the timing of this video. Nonetheless, the subject matter is going to be very relevant here, okay? I want to make that known, all right? So let it continue.
Celebrated by all because it meant all were finally free-ish. There will inevitably be an all lives mattering of the movement. Here's a reason why and what we're going to talk about today. In 1654, it was time for a man, as I'll temporarily refer to him, to release John Kacer, a black indentured servant. Instead, the man told Kacer he was extending his time. Kacer left and became employed by a white man by the name of Robert Parker. The man sued Robert Parker in the Northampton court in 1654. And in 1655, the court ruled that the man could hold Kacer indefinitely the rest of his life. The court gave judicial sanction for this man to own a black slave. The man's name was Anthony Johnson, and he himself was a black man. At least that's what this infographic says. Now, a number of people will take the fact that Anthony Johnson owned black people as confirmation that U.S. chattel slavery couldn't have been about race. You should know that Anthony Johnson was once a slave or indentured servant himself. And there's a great distinction between the two, which we'll go over in detail later. But during their time, it's hard to tell because definitions for each status weren't as well defined as they are now. Well, a year after Anthony Johnson, who was born Antonio and anglicized his name to Anthony, was taken to Jamestown, Virginia in 1621, the homestead of the Bennett family where he worked alongside white immigrants was attacked by the Powhatan tribe and Johnson survived. Somehow, some way. And Anthony later gained his freedom, got married, had kids, and owned land. Anyhow, a former slave who owned slaves? This is the worst get you somebody who can do both in the history of all things. And yes, later, Anthony Johnson argued that John Kaser was a slave and not an indentured servant, as Kaser claimed. When it comes to the court ruling about Kaser, people conveniently skim over the African man being wrongfully sentenced to be a slave for the rest of his life, just because Anthony Johnson fits the narrative they want to be true. So, was Anthony Johnson the first slave owner in this country? If U.S. chattel slavery was not about race, as in white superiority over black people specifically, my question is, white people enslaved by either white people or black people? Before I answer these two questions, look, there's this rumor or theory or idea that the Irish were enslaved on this land, which would come to be known as the United States. But where are people getting this information? Yes, there are books, but Facebook posts, memes, and infographics like the one I read earlier. For instance, this article, where are the primary sources? And who is John Martin? And what else did he write? Also, this thing. One quick image search will show you that this picture, in fact, isn't of slave little girls, but oyster shuckers in South Carolina circa 1911. And of course, this picture of Anthony Johnson isn't of him either. As for the distinction between indentured servants, for which the Irish were, the vast majority of them went to Barbados in the West Indies and not the American colonies, which is also actually the case for most of the enslaved black people from Africa, with Brazil being a larger destination as well. With the industry of slavery came to be meant that black U.S. chattel enslaved people were overwhelmingly owned as private property. They were purchased and could never buy or earn their freedom. They would die as slaves. The children born to enslaved women were slaves, meaning they would belong to someone else from birth to death. Indentured servitude, on the other hand, was mutually agreed upon by the laborer and master. Most came to the West willingly, while some were subjected involuntarily due to being prisoners and vagabonds. The servant would be obligated to work a predetermined amount of time, typically 4 to 7 years. At the end of the term, servants could earn their freedom, money, clothing, livestock, land. The practice of indentured servitude declined in the second half of the 17th century as colonists made the full transition to African slave labor, which was cheaper and increased consistent production. This isn't to say that indentured servants had it easy. They suffered unspeakable acts too. Some were killed before their contracts were up. They were beaten, abused, and taken advantage of as well. Matthew Riley, an archaeologist who has studied white communities in the Caribbean, said this about Irish indentured servants. During their period of servitude, their treatment varied widely. Some suffered extreme violence and brutality, especially the Irish in the Caribbean, but many had avenues to pursue legal action against their masters, something never extended to the enslaved. You know, while I'm attacking misinformation and being misled and falsehoods, I want to encourage you kids and those who may be watching this to look up a number of things yourselves. Like this fact checker and a primary source for today, Irish librarian and historian Liam Hogan. We've talked about the one-drop rule before, but then there's also Partis Sequitur Ventrum and an act concerning servants and slaves. Don't forget about the Dred Scott decision. Which brings us to our answers. Black people did not have legal rights. They couldn't legally own white people in the U.S., nor by right or custom. When the ship Desire brought a cargo of Africans from Barbados to Boston in 1634, in 1640, John Punch, a runaway servant of African descent, was sentenced to lifelong slavery in Virginia, while the 2 European-born companions who fled with him had their indentures extended by 1 year. What happened to John Punch occurred before what happened to John Kaser. So that answers our first question. Anthony Johnson wasn't the first slave owner in the U.S. He was one of the first, though. Besides, if indentured servitude for the Irish was what people say it was, then where are the vestiges from that industry? Landmarks, historical sites, where is the physical representation and enduring legacy from that time period? Was there a date, a law, or event? which led to their enslavement ending. I mean, look at Rhode Island. The name of that state is actually Colony of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, and we know why. Oh, and never mind the fact that the Irish were slave owners in America or involved and benefited from the dispossession of indigenous people's lands across multiple continents. With black people being treated like cattle, it would still be better to be poor and white than to be black at all. This was an era when a black person, an N-word, and a slave were interchangeable terms. Something that needs to be said is that black men who enslaved black people were not deemed as equals to their white counterparts. Proving that point is another famous or infamous black enslaver, William Ellison. So why would a black person enslave another black person? Money. Even if Anthony Johnson was the first slave owner in America, he isn't. He wasn't the last black one either. It doesn't take away the racially based system of hereditary slavery that harmed the vast majority of black people living within it. By the way, according to Henry Louis Gates, after Johnson's death, a court ruled he was a Negro and by consequence an alien. Subsequently, the colony of Virginia seized his family's land and his descendants faded from the historical record. So there's that. Before I head to the cookout, I personally hear the black people owned slaves or Africans sold black people into slavery or the Irish were slaves and you don't hear us/them complaining stuffs. When reparations for U.S. chattel slavery comes up and when Black Lives Matter is frequently said, these things are going to build with the 1619 Project and critical race theory and Juneteenth. So when an All Lives Matter says, if we pay black people reparations for slavery, then everybody in the world should be owed money because every race was enslaved at some point, tell them no. We're talking about what happened in this land, in this time, in this country. They ain't invited to the cookout, so we're gonna be all right.
All right, family. So I let that go on without interruption so that everything could be made clear on what I was saying earlier here tonight. Okay. Now, let me ask those of you that listen to this broadcast front to back. Did you learn what you needed to learn over here tonight? Especially if you're a younger person. Did you get the point about what I was making clear in my point of contention about Irish people being slaves? Did we thoroughly cover all bases and a lot more over here? Did we get it straight? Because I'm not going to address Mr. Holloman no more, okay? Because this was not done primarily to get him to change his mind or to go back and forth with him. No, not at all. This is going to be a record for anybody that wants to learn about this type of information to get it straight and make sure that they have good information and accurate history on what went on, okay? So I think we've done our job here with that tonight. And again, as we get ready to close, please make sure that when you hear people saying these things, especially the white supremacist means what's etc., you better understand that that's just trolling. And if you dig deeper and start looking at what they're talking about, you will find that they're a bunch of lies. OK, don't get caught up in these things. And when people are trying to educate you, be open to at least hear what they're trying to tell you so that you don't continue to dwell in a perpetual state of ignorance, because that's a very dangerous thing for any black person in America today. All right. With that said, family, salute to everybody contribute to the broadcast. We got a lot of things we're going to address coming up here on the channel and Patreon. Okay, if you join us over there. So stay tuned for that. And with that said, salute Black first, and I will see you all in future content.